When an 18-year-old girl crashed bleeding through a restaurant's back door on the worst night of her life, she had no idea the man in the corner booth could destroy empires with a phone call. Damien Moretti didn't become the city's most feared crime boss by trusting polished lies. And when the respectable man who followed her inside claimed she was just his troubled stepdaughter, Damien saw through the performance immediately. What happened next would shatter a trafficking network that had hidden behind charity galas and forged medical records for years. This is Alara's story, a story of survival, justice, and the unexpected protector who believed her when no one else would. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The rain hit the city like punishment that night, turning streets into rivers and visibility into a memory. Inside Moretti's, the upscale Italian restaurant that served as Damien Moretti's legitimate front and actual headquarters, crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths and the quiet murmur of expensive conversations. The main dining room held couples celebrating anniversaries, business deals being sealed over wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and politicians who pretended not to recognize each other. But in the back corner, in a booth specifically designed to see everything while being seen by no one, Damien Moretti sat alone. He was 38 years old, though most people would have guessed younger if not for his eyes. Those eyes had seen too much, done too much, survived too much to ever look young again. His dark hair was cut short and precise, his charcoal suit tailored to hide the weapon he always carried, and his fingers, long, elegant, dangerous, rested on the rim of a whiskey glass he hadn't actually drunk from in 20 minutes. Damien didn't drink when he worked, and he was always working. Mr. Moretti, his second-in-command, Marco, appeared at the booth's edge like a shadow-gaining substance. The Castellano shipment cleared customs. No issues. Good. Damien's voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of voice that made people lean in to hear and then wish they hadn't. And the councilman? He'll vote our way. His daughter's college fund just got very generous. Make sure it's untraceable. Always is, boss. Marco disappeared back into the restaurant's choreographed chaos, and Damien returned his attention to the window. Rain streaked down the glass in patterns that reminded him of tears, which reminded him of things he'd spent 15 years trying to forget. His sister's face. Always his sister's face. Lucia had been 13 when she disappeared. Damien had been 23, already deep in the family business, already building the reputation that would eventually make him the most powerful and most feared crime boss in the city. He'd torn the city apart looking for her. Burned bridges, called in every favor, threatened everyone who might have information. He'd found nothing. No body, no witnesses, no trace. Just a 13-year-old girl who walked to school one morning and never arrived, swallowed by a city that had thousands of ways to make people disappear. The police had investigated for 3 months before quietly filing her case away. Runaway, they'd concluded. Troubled home life. Probably headed to another city, another life. Damien knew better. Lucia hadn't run. Someone had taken her. And whoever that someone was had been smart enough, connected enough, careful enough to leave no trail. That was 15 years ago. Damien had built an empire since then, accumulated power that made politicians nervous and rival crime families cautious. He'd become the man people whispered about, the name that ended arguments and started negotiations. But he'd never found his sister. And some nights, sitting in his booth watching rain streak down windows, that failure felt like the only thing that mattered. The back door to the kitchen, the one that was always locked, always monitored, always secure, exploded inward at 9:47 p.m. The sound cut through the restaurant's ambiance like a gunshot. Conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths, heads turned, and then she stumbled through. The girl couldn't have been more than 18 or 19, though it was hard to tell through the blood and rain and terror. She wore what had once been a white dress, now torn and muddy and soaked through. Her feet were bare, cut and bleeding. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes around a face dominated by wild, desperate eyes. She took 3 steps into the kitchen before her legs gave out. The head chef, Antonio, started forward, but Damien was already moving. He'd crossed the distance from his booth to the kitchen in seconds, his brain processing details with the cold efficiency that had kept him alive through 2 decades of violence. Fresh blood on her dress, defensive wounds on her hands, bruising around her wrists that looked like restraints, Running, not walking. She'd been running hard and long. "Call an ambulance," someone said. "No." The girl's voice was hoarse, broken. "No police. No hospitals. Please. Everyone out." Damien's command was quiet, but absolute. "Clear the kitchen. Now." Antonio and his staff vanished. The servers who'd been gawking retreated. In 10 seconds, the kitchen was empty except for Damien, the girl, and Marco, who'd appeared at his boss's shoulder with his hand inside his jacket where he kept his gun. The girl tried to stand, failed, and ended up backed against an industrial refrigerator, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Please," she whispered. "Please, I just need... The back door, still hanging open, admitted another figure. This one was different, older, maybe 55, wearing an expensive suit that hadn't been touched by the rain. He had silver hair styled perfectly, a face that belonged on charity gala invitations, and eyes that assessed the room with the calculation of someone used to controlling situations. "There you are, sweetheart." His voice was smooth, concerned, perfectly calibrated for an audience. "I'm so sorry about this." He addressed Damien directly, man to man, professional to professional. "My stepdaughter, she's not well. Stopped taking her medication again." The girl made a sound like a wounded animal. "I'm Dr. Victor Dane." He produced a business card from thin air, offering it with an apologetic smile. "Psychiatrist, actually. Ironic, isn't it? I've spent my career helping troubled minds, and my own stepdaughter." He sighed. "She has paranoid delusions. Believes people are trying to hurt her, runs away during episodes. I've been searching for her all evening." It was a good performance. Damien had seen thousands of performances in his life. People lying to save themselves, lying to hurt others, lying just to see if they could. This man was good at it. Professional. Practiced. "Alara, sweetie." Victor took a step toward her, his voice gentle. "Let's get you home. Get you dried off, get your medication adjusted. Everything's going to be fine." "No." The word came out strangled. "No, please, I don't." Damien held up one hand. Everyone stopped. He studied the girl, Alara, apparently, with the same attention he gave to contracts worth millions and threats worth dying over. She was pressed against the refrigerator like it was the only thing holding her up, her whole body shaking, her breathing too fast. Her eyes darted between Damien and Victor, calculating escape routes, measuring distances, preparing to run or fight or die. But she wasn't looking at Damien with fear. She was looking at Victor that way. Damien had spent 2 decades reading people. It was how he'd survived, how he'd built his empire, how he'd turned the Moretti family from a mid-level operation into the city's dominant power. He could read lies in the tension of shoulders, violence in the set of a jaw, betrayal in the shift of eyes. And what he read in this girl wasn't delusion. It was terror. He crossed the kitchen slowly, deliberately, and knelt in front of Alara. At his eye level, he was less threatening, less towering, just a man in an expensive suit getting his knees wet on a kitchen floor. "Alara." He kept his voice quiet. "I'm going to ask you one question, just one, and I need you to answer me honestly." She stared at him, her breath coming in short gasps. "Do you know him?" The question hung in the air. Behind Damien, he heard Victor draw breath to speak, but a look from Marco shut that down fast. Alara's eyes filled with tears. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Yes," she whispered. He's the one who..." Her voice broke. "He's been selling me." The kitchen went absolutely silent. Victor's mask didn't crack. That was the first tell. A real stepfather, falsely accused of something so horrible, would have exploded in outrage, would have demanded proof, called for police, threatened lawsuits. Victor just smiled sadly. "You see," he said to Damien, as if they were allies in a difficult situation. "This is the delusion. She's been saying things like this for months, paranoid fantasies about trafficking, about being held prisoner. Her therapist says it's likely related to early childhood trauma. Her mother married me when Alara was 16, and she never quite adjusted to Marco." Damien stood. "Lock the front door. No one leaves. No one enters." "Boss, do it." Marco disappeared. Victor's smile finally flickered. "Now, Mr. Moretti, I understand this is your establishment, but I don't think you have the legal authority to sit down. Damien gestured to a stool. It wasn't a suggestion. I really must insist. You can sit or you can be sat. Choose. Something in Damien's voice, something cold and old and absolutely certain, made Victor's calculation shift. He sat. Damien turned back to Alara. She was still shaking, still pressed against the refrigerator, but something in her eyes had changed. Hope, maybe. Or just the desperate dying gasp of it. How long? Damien asked. 2 years. Her voice was barely audible. Since I turned 16. My mother died 8 months after she married him. Car accident. After that, he said I needed help. That I was having a breakdown from grief. He put me in a treatment facility. Name? Clearwater Hills. But it's not. It wasn't a real hospital. The doctors weren't real. The other patients were all... She choked on the word. We were all being sold. Victor laughed. It was a good laugh, full of sorrow and frustration and fatherly concern. You see how detailed the delusion is? She's constructed an entire narrative. Clearwater Hills is a perfectly legitimate psychiatric facility. I have her treatment records, her medication logs, everything. This is heartbreaking, truly, but where are these records? Damien asked. In my car. I can show you everything. Her diagnosis, her history of... Marco, Damien called. When his second appeared, he said, Bring me Dr. Dane's car keys. Get his phone, too. You can't just... I can. Damien's voice was flat. And I am. While Marco patted down Victor, efficiently, professionally, finding a phone and a luxury car key fob, Damien turned his attention back to Alara. You ran, he said. Why tonight? She wrapped her arms around herself. There's a man, a buyer, from overseas. Victor has been preparing me for 3 weeks. Special meals, new clothes, language lessons. Tonight was supposed to be... Her voice cracked. Tonight was supposed to be when he took me. Where were you? Victor's house, the North Side, Blackwood Estates. Damien knew the neighborhood. Old money, big houses, the kind of place where neighbors minded their own business and privacy hedges were 12 feet tall. How did you get out? Bathroom window, 2nd floor. I waited until Victor was on a call and I ran. Barefoot, because my shoes would have made noise. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't go to the police because Victor has friends there. I couldn't go to a hospital because he'd just signed paperwork and take me back. I couldn't... She looked around the kitchen wildly. I saw lights, heard people. Thought maybe in a crowd, in public, I could find someone who would listen. Someone who would... Believe you, Damien finished. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Marco returned with Victor's phone and keys. Car's a BMW, black, parked 2 blocks over on Wellington. Search it, Damien ordered. Bring me anything that looks like documentation. Mr. Moretti. Victor's voice had shed its gentle concern, turning sharp. This is illegal search and seizure. I'm a respected psychiatrist with a practice spanning 20 years. You're a... He stopped himself just in time. A what? Damien asked softly. Victor's jaw tightened. A businessman. I'm sure you understand the importance of reputation. If you help spread my disturbed stepdaughter's delusions, if you prevent me from getting her the help she desperately needs, there will be consequences. Legal consequences. I have lawyers who... Your stepdaughter, Damien interrupted, is bleeding, barefoot, and terrified. You showed up dry, dressed, and calm. You were chasing her, but you're not out of breath. Not worried. Not panicked. You're performing. I'm trying to help her. No. Damien pulled over another stool and sat facing Victor, close enough to be intimate, close enough to be threatening. You're trying to control the situation. There's a difference. For just a second, Victor's mask slipped. Something cold and calculating flickered across his face before the concerned stepfather expression returned. But Damien had seen it, and Damien never forgot. Alara, he said, without taking his eyes off Victor. Look at me. She did. I'm going to ask you to do something very difficult. I need you to tell me everything. Names, places, dates. Everything you remember about where you were held, who visited, who paid. Can you do that? I tried to tell people before. No one believed me. They all said Victor had documents, that I was sick, that I needed... I believe you. 3 words. Simple, direct, absolute. Alara stared at him like he'd just offered her oxygen after years underwater. Why? She whispered. Damien thought about his sister, about Lucha's face the last time he'd seen her, laughing at breakfast, complaining about a math test, about 15 years of searching, of failure, of cold cases and dead ends. Because I know what truth looks like, he said, and I know what lies look like, and I know the difference. Behind them, the kitchen door opened. Marco reappeared carrying a leather messenger bag and a manila folder. Found these in the car, he said, hidden under the front seat. There's more, but I figured you'd want to see these first. Damien took the folder, opened it. Inside were photographs. Girls. Dozens of them. Different ages, different backgrounds, but all with the same look in their eyes. The look of prey that knows it's been caught. And in the corner of each photo, a number, a price. Damien's blood turned to ice. He looked up at Victor, who'd gone very pale. Paperwork, Victor said quickly. Research files. I'm writing a book about exploitation, about how to identify victims. Those are case studies, examples of... You're lying. Damien's voice was colder than Victor had ever heard another human speak. And you're done lying. He stood, towering over the psychiatrist who'd built his life on being believed. Marco, call Detective Quinn. Tell her we have a situation that requires her specific expertise. He paused. Tell her it's trafficking. You can't just... I can. Damien leaned down until he was eye level with Victor. Because you made one critical mistake tonight, Doctor. You followed your victim into my restaurant, my territory. And on my territory, my word is law. This is kidnapping, illegal detention. I'll have you arrested. Try. Damien's smile was terrible. I'd love to see you explain to the police why you're so desperate to leave with a bleeding, terrified girl. Why you have photographs of children with prices attached. Why your story has changed 3 times in the last 20 minutes. Victor's face twisted. The mask finally, fully shattered. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he hissed. The people I work with, the connections I have. You're just some 2-bit gangster playing dress-up in a restaurant. I have judges, councilmen, police captains in my pocket. You can't touch me. We'll see. Damien turned back to Alara, who'd been watching the confrontation with wide eyes. There's an office upstairs, he told her gently. It has a lock, a couch, and a bathroom. Marco's going to take you there. You're safe now. No one's getting through him. You're just going to believe me? Her voice was small, disbelieving. Just like that? Just like that. But I could be lying. I could be exactly what he says I am. Crazy, delusional, making everything up. Damien shook his head. You ran 2 miles barefoot in the rain. Your feet are shredded. You have ligature marks on your wrists and needle marks on your arms. You knew the name of the facility, the general area of his house, and specific details about tonight's planned transaction. You're not delusional. You're traumatized. There's a difference. Alara's face crumpled. She started to cry, not the desperate, terrified tears from before, but something deeper. Relief, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Come on, Marco said softly. Let's get you somewhere warm. She let him lead her toward the stairs, but paused at the doorway. Why are you helping me? She asked Damien. You don't know me. This isn't your problem. Why risk everything for a stranger? Damien thought about telling her, about Lucia, about 15 years of searching, about the guilt that had shaped every decision he'd made since his sister disappeared. But this wasn't about his guilt. This was about a girl who'd run through the rain looking for someone to believe her. Because you asked, he said simply, and because I can. After she was gone, Damien turned his full attention to Victor Dane. The psychiatrist had recovered some of his composure, but there was a wildness around his eyes now, a trapped animal desperation that all his years of practiced charm couldn't quite hide. You're making a mistake, Victor said, a very expensive mistake. Tell me about Clearwater Hills. It's a psychiatric facility, legitimate, licensed. I can provide you with... Tell me the truth. Victor's mouth opened, closed. He was calculating, Damien realized, running through options, weighing risks, trying to find an angle. There's no angle, Damien said, reading his thoughts. There's no deal. There's just the truth right now. Or what comes after. And what comes after? Damien smiled. It was the smile that made grown men weep. You really don't want to find out. They stared at each other. Outside, rain hammered against windows. Somewhere in the restaurant, a phone was ringing. Damien could hear his staff moving through the dining room, could hear the quiet conversations of people who knew something was happening but didn't know what. I want a lawyer, Victor finally said. You'll get one, after you talk to Detective Quinn. I'm invoking my right to... You're not under arrest yet. This is just a conversation. A conversation I'm not legally required to participate in. True? Damien leaned against the counter, casual. But while we're having this conversation, you're not making phone calls, not warning anyone, not destroying evidence. Every minute you spend here is a minute your network doesn't know it's been compromised. Understanding dawned in Victor's eyes. You're stalling. I'm giving a detective I trust time to get here, time to see the evidence, time to hear Alara's story before you can lawyer up and start spinning narratives. Damien checked his watch. Detective Quinn is thorough, patient, and she has a particular hatred for men who hurt children. You'll like her. This is illegal detention. So sue me. Victor's hands clenched into fists. You think you're saving her? You think one scared girl's story is going to bring down an operation that's been running for a decade? I have protections you can't imagine, resources, friends in places that matter. Had, Damien corrected, past tense. You had those things. Then you followed a girl into my restaurant, and now everything's changed. Nothing's changed. She has no proof, no witnesses, no evidence except her own crazy story. It's my word against hers, and I'm a respected psychiatrist with 20 years of... The photographs, Damien interrupted, tapping the folder. The ones with prices. Research. The needle marks on her arms. Psychiatric medication. The ligature marks on her wrists. Restraints. Standard procedure for patients who self-harm. The fact that you're not acting like a father. You're acting like a businessman who just lost inventory. That one landed. Victor's mask flickered again, and for just a second Damien saw the real man underneath, cold, calculating, absolutely devoid of remorse. Even if everything she says is true, Victor said quietly, even if you could prove it all, I still win. Because the people I work with don't go down alone. We built this network with very specific protections, very specific insurance policies. You take me down, you take down judges, prosecutors, police captains, people who've been taking money, taking favors, taking girls for years. They'll protect me because protecting me protects themselves. Maybe, Damien acknowledged, or maybe they'll throw you to the wolves to save themselves. Either way, your little rescue mission fails. Either I walk because I'm protected, or I trade information for immunity. Your girl doesn't get justice. She gets to watch me walk away, and she gets to spend the rest of her life knowing the system failed her. Again. Damien studied him. You've thought about this, planned for it. I'm a careful man. Careful men don't chase victims into public restaurants. For the first time, Victor looked uncertain. She was supposed to be sedated. The buyer was coming at midnight. Everything was arranged, but somehow she... He stopped, realizing he was confirming Alara's story. Somehow she escaped, Damien finished, because even careful plans fail when the prey is desperate enough. The kitchen door opened. A woman in her mid-40s walked in, wearing a rain-soaked coat over Detective's casual clothes. Her dark hair was pulled back, her face was tired, and her eyes were the sharp, intelligent eyes of someone who'd seen too much and refused to look away. Detective Mara Quinn. Moretti. She nodded to Damien. Your man said trafficking. Look at the folder. She did. Her face went from professional calm to cold fury in the space of 3 photographs. Where did these come from? Dr. Victor Dane's car. Damien gestured to Victor, who'd gone very still. Hidden under the front seat. Along with other documentation I think you'll find interesting. Those are research materials, Victor started. Shut up. Quinn's voice was flat. You can talk to me at the station with your lawyer after I read you your rights. She looked at Damien. The victim? Upstairs. Safe. Willing to talk. How old? 18. How long? 2 years. Quinn's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone, made a call. This is Detective Quinn. I need CSI at Moretti's restaurant. I need backup. And I need a female officer trained in trafficking victim interviews. Also get me a warrant for... She looked at Victor. What's your address? I want my lawyer. You'll get one. Address. Now. Or I add obstruction to your growing list of problems. Victor recited an address in Blackwood Estates. Quinn relayed it to whoever was on the phone, then hung up. Mr. Moretti, I'm going to need statements from you and your staff. I'm also going to need that folder and anything else you took from his car. It's all here. Good. She looked at Victor. Stand up. Hands behind your back. This is harassment. Illegal search and seizure. Your lawyers will meet you at the station. Quinn produced handcuffs. Dr. Victor Dane, you're being detained for questioning regarding suspected human trafficking. You have the right to remain silent. As she read him his rights, Damien watched Victor's face cycle through emotions. Rage, fear, calculation, and finally, something like resignation. This isn't over, Victor said quietly, looking directly at Damien. You have no idea what you've started. Neither do you. Quinn led Victor out through the kitchen, through the restaurant where every diner was watching now, through the front door where 2 patrol cars had just arrived, lights flashing. Damien stood in the kitchen doorway, watching rain fall on a man who'd hidden behind respectability and charm and carefully constructed lies. Marco appeared at his shoulder. Boss, what do you want me to do with the restaurant? Close it. Send everyone home. This is a crime scene now. And the girl? Keep her safe. Keep her hidden. Quinn will want to interview her, but until then, no one gets near her. No one. Understood. Damien climbed the stairs to his office. Through the locked door, he could hear quiet sounds, water running, someone moving around. He knocked. Silence. Ilara? It's Damien. The detective is here. Victor's been arrested. You're safe. More silence. Then, can I come out? When you're ready. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly. Ilara had washed her face, though her eyes were still red. Someone, probably Marco, had given her a sweater that was too large and a blanket that she'd wrapped around her shoulders. She looked young and scared and fragile. She also looked alive. What happens now? She asked. Now you tell Detective Quinn everything you remember, everything you can. Names, places, dates. It's going to be hard. It's going to hurt. But it's the only way to stop this. Will they believe me? Quinn will, and her belief is the one that matters. Ilara stepped into the hallway, looking around at the office, the stairs, the restaurant below. I've passed this place 100 times. Never came in. It always seemed too expensive, too fancy, too much for someone like me. And now? Now it's the place that saved my life. She looked at him. Why did you believe me? Really? You're a crime boss. Everyone knows who you are, what you do. You could have just let Victor take me. Could have avoided all this trouble. Why didn't you? Damien thought about how to answer. About Lucia. About guilt. About the ghosts that haunted expensive suits and quiet booths. I had a sister, he said finally. A long time ago. She disappeared. I never found her. He met Ilara's eyes. I couldn't save her. But I could save you. Understanding passed between them. Not forgiveness. Damien wasn't looking for that. Not redemption. He knew better. Just recognition. One broken person seeing another and choosing, for once, to help instead of hurt. Thank you, Ilara whispered. Don't thank me yet. The hard part's just beginning. Downstairs, Detective Quinn was interviewing staff, photographing evidence, building the case that would either bring down a trafficking network or fall apart in the face of expensive lawyers and corrupted systems. Outside, rain continued to fall on a city that held too many secrets and swallowed too many victims. But tonight, in a restaurant that smelled like Italian food and justice, one girl had run through the rain and found someone who believed her. And sometimes, Damien thought as he watched Ilara walk downstairs to meet her future, sometimes that was enough to start changing everything. The story wasn't over. It was barely beginning. But for the first time in 15 years, Damien Moretti felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope. Detective Quinn's interview room at the precinct was deliberately unwelcoming. Harsh fluorescent lights, gray walls, a metal table bolted to the floor. But when Ilara walked in 3 hours after Victor's arrest, Quinn had already transformed it. A space heater hummed in the corner. Someone had brought in a comfortable chair from another office. There was hot tea, not the burnt coffee usually offered to witnesses. Quinn stood when Alara entered, offering a hand. "I'm Detective Mara Quinn. You can call me Mara if that's easier. This is Officer Jennifer Park. She specializes in trafficking cases." Officer Park was younger, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She gestured to the comfortable chair. "Please, sit. Take your time. We're not here to rush you." Alara sat slowly, the oversized sweater Marco had given her still wrapped around her like armor. Her feet, now bandaged by the paramedic Quinn had called to the restaurant, were propped on a small stool. She looked exhausted and terrified and desperately, achingly young. "I've told this story before," she said quietly. "To social workers, to doctors, to police officers. No one ever believed me." "I believe you," Quinn said, "and I'm going to prove it." "How can you be sure? Victor has documents, medical records, psychiatrist evaluations saying I'm delusional." "Because documents can be forged, but trauma doesn't lie." Quinn pulled out the folder Damien had given her, opening it carefully. "These photographs were in Victor Dane's car, hidden. Can you tell me about them?" Alara looked at the images and her face went pale. "That's the intake room at Clearwater Hills. That's where they photographed us, for the website." "What website?" "The one buyers used. It was on the dark web, I think. Victor never let us see it, but I heard guards talking. They said we were cataloged like inventory." Her voice shook. "Different categories, different prices depending on age, appearance, languages spoken." Officer Park was taking notes, her pen moving steadily across paper. Quinn kept her eyes on Alara's face. "How many girls were there when you arrived?" 12. "In my section. But there were other sections, other buildings on the property. I heard there might have been 50 total, maybe more." "Names. I need you to try to remember names." Alara closed her eyes. "Sophia. She was 15, from Chicago. Her parents had died and she was in foster care when Victor's people found her. They told her she was going to a boarding school." A tear slid down her cheek. "Maya, 16, runaway from Seattle. They picked her up at a bus station." Another pause. "Caroline, 14. I don't know where she came from. She didn't talk much, just cried at night." "Are any of them still there?" "I don't know. Girls disappeared sometimes. Victor would say they'd been transferred to another facility for specialized treatment, but we all knew what that meant." Quinn's jaw tightened. "What did it mean?" "They'd been sold." The room went quiet except for the scratch of Officer Park's pen and the hum of the space heater. "Tell me about your first day there," Quinn said gently. Alara wrapped her arms around herself. "My mother had been dead for 3 weeks. I was grieving, barely functioning. Victor said I needed help. Professional help. He drove me there himself, talking the whole way about how this facility specialized in grief counseling, how they'd helped so many young people recover from loss." "What happened when you arrived?" "The building looked legitimate. Nice landscaping, professional signs, staff in medical uniforms. Victor walked me to the intake area, signed paperwork, kissed my forehead, told me he'd visit every week." She laughed bitterly. "He visited twice in 2 years, both times with potential buyers." "Did anyone explain why you were really there?" "Not at first. They put me in a room with 2 other girls, gave me medication that made me foggy and compliant, told me I was there for my own good. It wasn't until the first auction that I understood." Quinn leaned forward. "Auction?" "That's what they called it. Every few months buyers would come. Wealthy men from overseas mostly. Middle East, Eastern Europe, Asia. They'd walk through the facility like we were livestock, asking questions, touching." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Choosing." "How many auctions did you attend?" 4, but I was never chosen." She looked down at her hands. "Victor said I was too defiant, too much trouble, the kind of girl who would run. So he was training me, breaking me, making me compliant enough to sell." "How?" Alara's silence stretched. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "Isolation, drugs, punishment for resistance. He had a doctor, not a real one, I don't think, who experimented with different medications, trying to find the right combination to keep us calm but aware, functional but obedient." "This doctor have a name?" Dr. Ross, Michael Ross. He came twice a week, always wore expensive suits, always smelled like cologne that cost more than most people's cars. Officer Park's pen scratched faster. Were there guards? 4 regulars, 2 men, 2 women. They rotated shifts. Alara recited names, descriptions, identifying details. Her memory was sharp despite everything they'd done to her, and Quinn recognized the survival mechanism at work. Victims who cataloged their captors' information because information meant hope. Hope of escape. Hope of justice. What about the facility administrator? Margaret Chen. She ran day-to-day operations, handled the money, coordinated with buyers, managed the staff. Victor was the public face, the respected psychiatrist whose name gave the facility legitimacy. But Margaret was the one who actually ran things. Describe her. 50s, Asian American, always wore pantsuits and expensive jewelry. Had this way of smiling while she threatened you. She told me once that girls who caused problems had accidents, falls, overdoses, things that looked natural. Quinn's expression hardened. Did you witness any of these accidents? 1. A girl named Jessica. She tried to escape 6 months ago, climbed over the fence at night. They caught her before she reached the road. Alara's voice trembled. 3 days later, she died. Officially, it was a seizure. Her parents believed it. Everyone believed it, except us. Where is Jessica now? Buried somewhere. I don't know where. They handled everything privately. Said it was to spare the family. The interview continued for 2 more hours. Alara described the layout of Clearwater Hills, the main building, the dormitories, the medical wing where Dr. Ross conducted his experiments. She recited license plate numbers of cars she'd seen in the parking lot. She named buyers she'd overheard guards discussing. She described the fake therapy sessions designed to gaslight victims into doubting their own memories. By the time Quinn called for a break, Officer Park had filled 20 pages with notes. You're doing incredibly well, Quinn told Alara. I know this is exhausting, but everything you're telling me is building a case. A strong case. Will it be strong enough? I'm going to make sure it is. While Alara rested in a private room with Officer Park standing guard, Quinn returned to her desk where her partner, Detective Ray Chen, was waiting. Tell me you got something from Dane's house, Quinn said. Chen grinned. It was not a pleasant expression. We got everything. Computer files he thought were encrypted, ledgers hidden in his study, burner phones in the garage, and a safe in his bedroom containing $50,000 in cash, 3 passports with different names, and a handgun that's probably illegal in 4 states. Files show anything useful? Client lists, payment records, communication logs with Clearwater Hills dating back 12 years. Chen pulled up files on his computer. This operation is bigger than we thought, Mara. Way bigger. Dane's just one part of a network that spans 3 states and involves at least 24 active participants. Quinn studied the screen. Names, dates, transactions. How many victims? Based on the records, over 200 in the last decade. The number hit like a physical blow. Quinn had worked trafficking cases before, had seen the damage predators could do. But 200 lives destroyed, 200 families shattered, all hidden behind a respectable psychiatrist's practice and a facility that looked legitimate on paper. Get me everything on Clearwater Hills, she ordered. Incorporation documents, licensing records, staff employment files, financial statements. I want to know every person who worked there, every inspector who signed off on their certifications, every official who looked the other way. Already on it. I've also got units sitting on Margaret Chen's house and Dr. Ross's apartment. Once we move on everyone simultaneously. Good. Because the moment Dane lawyers up and word gets out, they'll scatter like roaches. Chen hesitated. There's something else. The client list includes names you're going to recognize. A state senator, 2 judges, a police captain from the 5th precinct, a CEO, whose company just went public. Quinn's stomach sank. How deep does this go? Deep enough that we need to be very careful about who we trust. These aren't just buyers, Mara. Some of them are protectors. They've been providing cover, killing investigations, making witnesses disappear. Then we go over their heads, federal jurisdiction, FBI. Already made the call. Agent Sarah Mitchell is flying in from the regional office tonight. She's bringing a task force. Quinn nodded, feeling the familiar weight of a case that was about to explode into something much larger than a single victim's rescue. What about Moretti? Chen's expression shifted. What about him? He's the one who called this in, detained Dane until we arrived, turned over evidence, but he's also set a crime boss. Yeah. Chen drummed his fingers on his desk. We running parallel investigations? Not unless we have to. Right now, Moretti's cooperation is valuable. He gave us Alara, he gave us Dane, and he's not asking for anything in return. Crime bosses always want something in return. Maybe, or maybe this is personal for him. Chen raised an eyebrow. Personal how? Quinn thought about Damien Moretti's reputation, the violence, the control, the empire built on fear and money. But she also thought about how he'd looked at Alara in that kitchen, how he'd believed her instantly when everyone else had dismissed her for 2 years. His sister disappeared 15 years ago, Quinn said quietly. Never found. I think he sees her when he looks at Alara. That make him an ally or a wild card? Both, which is why we keep him informed but at arm's length. She stood. I'm going back to Alara. She's got more to tell, and I want it all on record before Dane's lawyers start filing motions. Back in the interview room, Alara was staring at the wall with the 1,000-yard stare Quinn had seen in combat veterans and trauma survivors. Officer Park looked up when Quinn entered, giving a subtle headshake that meant not good. Alara? Quinn sat down carefully. I know you're tired, but I need to ask you about tonight, about what happened at Victor's house. Alara blinked slowly, coming back from wherever her mind had retreated. He was preparing me for the buyer, the one from overseas. He'd been talking about this sale for weeks, said this man paid premium prices for girls with specific qualities. What qualities? Young, American, educated, fluent in English. Her voice was mechanical, reciting facts without emotion. Victor had been giving me language lessons, teaching me how to serve tea, how to walk, how to smile. He said this buyer appreciated traditional femininity combined with Western sophistication. Quinn's hands clenched under the table. When was the transaction supposed to happen? Tonight, midnight, at Victor's house. Alara looked directly at Quinn. I was supposed to be drugged, compliant, ready for transport. But I pretended to take the medication, held it under my tongue until Victor left the room, then spit it out. Smart. Desperate, Alara corrected. I knew this was my last chance. Once I left the country, I'd never be found, never be freed. So when Victor was on a phone call in his study, I locked the bathroom door, climbed out the window, and ran. How did you know where to go? I didn't. I just ran toward lights, toward people. I thought if I could get somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses, maybe someone would help. She laughed bitterly. I've tried running before, 3 times. Each time, people called the police. Each time, Victor showed up with his doctor credentials and his concerned father act, and they handed me back to him. What made tonight different? Damien Moretti. Alara said the name with something like reverence. He didn't care about credentials or documents or respectable appearances. He just looked at me and knew. Quinn thought about the crime boss who derailed a trafficking operation because one scared girl had stumbled into his restaurant, about how justice sometimes came from unexpected places. Tell me about the buyer, she said, the one who was supposed to take you tonight. I never saw him, but I heard Victor on the phone. He spoke in English but with an accent. Middle Eastern, I think. He kept saying the money was ready, that transport was arranged, that everything was confirmed. Did Victor mention a name? Alara closed her eyes, concentrating. Omar or Amir, something like that. And he mentioned a city, Dubai. Officer Park made a note. Quinn filed the information away for the federal agents who'd be taking point on international trafficking. What happened after you ran? I just kept going. My feet were bleeding, but I couldn't stop. I could hear Victor behind me at first calling my name, trying to sound concerned in case anyone heard. But I was faster. Scared gives you speed. She smiled slightly. I lost him near the commercial district, ducked through an alley, came out near the restaurant, saw the lights, heard people talking. The back door was ajar. Someone from the kitchen was taking out trash. I crashed through. Didn't think, didn't plan. Just knew I needed witnesses. needed help, and found Damien Moretti, and found someone who believed me. Alara looked at Quinn. What happens now? To Victor, to the facility, to all those girls? Now we build a case so airtight that no lawyer, no judge, no amount of money can make this go away. Quinn's voice was steel. Alara stared at her. You really think you can do that? Go after senators and judges and police captains? I have to. Quinn's voice softened. Because if I don't, what happened to you happens to the next girl, and the one after that. And it never stops. Tears streamed down Alara's face, not the desperate, terrified tears from the restaurant, something quieter. Relief mixed with grief mixed with the first fragile shoots of hope. Thank you, she whispered. Quinn reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Don't thank me yet, the hard part's just beginning. At 4:47 a.m., while Alara slept fitfully in a safe house with Officer Park standing guard, Detective Quinn stood in a pre-dawn briefing room with 40 officers, 12 FBI agents, and enough tactical gear to start a small war. Agent Sarah Mitchell, the FBI's regional expert on trafficking, stood at the front of the room pointing to a projected map of Clearwater Hills. This is not a standard raid, she said, her voice carrying authority earned through 20 years of bringing down predators. This is a rescue operation first, arrest second. Our priority is victim safety. Understood? A chorus of affirmatives. Intel suggests between 30 and 50 victims currently on site. Ages range from 12 to 19. Many will be drugged. Some will be conditioned to resist rescue. They've been told police are dangerous, that will hurt them, that cooperation with their captors is survival. Mitchell clicked to the next slide showing building layouts. Alpha Team takes the main building and administrative offices. Bravo Team secures the dormitories. Charlie Team locks down the medical wing. Delta Team handles perimeter and prevents anyone from fleeing. We go in fast, we go in quiet, and we get those girls out. Quinn stood near the back, checking her weapon for the third time. Beside her, Chen was reviewing floor plans on his tablet. You ready for this? He asked. I've been ready since Alara walked into that interview room. This is going to get ugly. Important people are going to fall. There will be blowback. Quinn smiled grimly. Good. Let them fall. At precisely 5 a.m., as the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky, 40 vehicles descended on Clearwater Hills. The facility sat on 15 acres of carefully manicured grounds, hidden behind walls that looked decorative but were actually security barriers. The main gate had a guardhouse. The guard on duty barely had time to reach for his phone before tactical officers swarmed his position. Federal agents, put your hands up! The guard complied, too shocked to resist. Alpha Team breached the main building's entrance with a battering ram. Inside, the administrative staff was just arriving for the morning shift. Margaret Chen, impeccably dressed even at dawn, froze in the lobby with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Margaret Chen, Agent Mitchell said, badge held high. FBI, you're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, and about 40 other charges I'm going to enjoy reading to you. Chen's cup shattered on the marble floor. This is a medical facility. You can't just... We can. We are. Get on your knees. Hands behind your head. In the dormitories, Bravo Team moved room by room, finding girls in various states of consciousness. Some were awake, terrified by the armed officers. Others were so heavily sedated they could barely stand. Officer Park, who'd insisted on joining the raid despite exhaustion, moved through the chaos with calm authority. We're here to help, she told each girl. You're safe now. We're taking you somewhere safe. In the medical wing, Charlie Team found Dr. Michael Ross destroying files. Papers burned in a metal wastebasket. A computer sat in a sink filled with water. Freeze! An agent's weapon trained on the psychiatrist. Step away from the evidence. Ross raised his hands, his expensive suit already disheveled. I have rights. I have a lawyer. You can't. We can. You're under arrest for practicing medicine without a license, administering controlled substances to minors, and participating in a trafficking conspiracy. You can tell your lawyer all about it downtown. By 6:30 a.m., Clearwater Hills was a crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off buildings. Evidence technicians photographed everything. Medical personnel triaged victims, checking vital signs and documenting injuries. Quinn walked through the main dormitory, seeing the reality behind Alara's descriptions. Narrow beds bolted to floors, locks on the outside of doors, barred windows disguised as security features. Medicine cabinets stocked with enough sedatives to tranquilize an army. In one room, she found a wall covered in scratches. Someone had carved names into the plaster with fingernails or contraband sharp objects. Sarah, Michelle, Anna, Lucia. Quinn stopped at that last name. Lucia. Could it be? Could Damien Moretti's missing sister have ended up here? She photographed the wall carefully, then called Chen over. Run this name through missing persons databases. Lucia Moretti. Disappeared 15 years ago when she was 13. You think she might have been here? I think we need to check every angle. And if she was... Quinn trailed off, thinking about what that information would mean to the crime boss who'd started this whole investigation. By noon, the facility had been completely processed. 37 girls were transported to hospitals and temporary shelters. Margaret Chen, Dr. Ross, and 14 staff members were in custody. Computers and files were being analyzed by the FBI's forensic team. And in interview rooms across the city, powerful men were starting to realize their secrets were about to become public knowledge. At the precinct, Quinn sat down with Chen to review what they'd found. Client list is confirmed, Chen said. State Senator Richard Morrison, Judge Patricia Whitmore, Captain Daniel Hayes from the 5th Precinct, CEO Marcus Thornton, plus about 40 other names ranging from businessmen to lawyers to a medical examiner. Which means we can't trust normal channels, Quinn said. If we route this through standard procedures, evidence disappears and witnesses recant. Mitchell's already coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're bringing in an outside prosecutor, someone with no local connections. This goes federal all the way. Quinn nodded, watching through the one-way glass as Margaret Chen sat in an interview room waiting for her lawyer. The woman who'd run Clearwater Hills looked smaller now, less polished. Reality was setting in. What about the international buyers? Quinn asked. Interpol's been notified. The buyer who was supposed to collect Alara tonight, we've identified him as Omar Al-Rahman, a businessman from Dubai with suspected trafficking connections. Dubai police are coordinating with their federal agencies. Will they actually prosecute? Chen shrugged. That's above our pay grade. But at least his name's on a list now. At least someone's watching. Quinn's phone buzzed. A text from Officer Park. Alara's awake, asking for you. She found Alara in the safe house living room, wrapped in blankets and staring at a television showing news coverage of the Clearwater Hills raid. The screen displayed aerial footage of the facility, police vehicles, agents escorting people in handcuffs. They're calling it the biggest trafficking bust in state history, Alara said quietly. All because I ran through the rain. All because you survived, Quinn corrected, and because you were brave enough to tell the truth. How many girls did they find? 37. All safe, all receiving medical care and counseling. Alara closed her eyes. Sophia Maya Caroline? Quinn checked her notes. Sophia Martinez, age 15, recovered, being reunited with family in Chicago. Maya Chen, 16, recovered, in protective custody until we locate relatives. Caroline, she paused. We found a Caroline Bradshaw, but she's 14. Is that her? Yes. Is she okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, she'll need time. They all will. Alara nodded slowly. What happens to them now? What happens to me? You'll be assigned a victim advocate, someone to help you navigate the legal system, access counseling, figure out next steps. You're 18, so you have more autonomy than the younger girls, but you'll still have support. And Victor? Quinn's expression hardened. Victor Dane is facing 73 felony charges, including trafficking, conspiracy, kidnapping, and assault. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. What about the others? The buyers? The important people? We're building cases against all of them. It'll take time, but we're not stopping until everyone involved faces justice. Alara looked at the television again, watching officers lead Margaret Chen out of Clearwater Hills in handcuffs. I keep waiting to wake up, to find out this is another dream, and I'm still in that room, still waiting to be sold. You're awake. This is real. You're free. Am I? Alara's voice was small. I have nowhere to go. No family, no money, No education beyond high school. Victor isolated me from everyone I knew before my mother died. What kind of freedom is this? Quinn sat beside her. The kind you build yourself. One day at a time, one choice at a time, starting with choosing to survive. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You've been doing it for 2 years. Now you just do it in a world where no one's hunting you. They sat together in silence, watching the news cycle through footage of the raid, interviews with FBI officials, statements from the U.S. Attorney's Office. The story was breaking national. Media outlets were scrambling. Politicians were preparing statements. The powerful men on Victor's client list were about to learn that money and influence had limits. And in a restaurant across town, Damian Moretti watched the same news coverage with Marco standing beside him. She did it, Marco said. That girl actually brought them down. With help, Damian replied. Quinn did the work. The FBI did the arrests. Alara just told the truth. That's all it took? That's all it ever takes. Someone willing to tell the truth and someone willing to believe it. On the screen, a reporter stood outside Clearwater Hills describing the facility's legitimate facade and criminal reality. Damian thought about all the victims who'd been hidden there, about the girls who'd died, about the ones who'd survived, about Lucia. His phone rang. Quinn. I need to show you something, she said without preamble. Can you come to the precinct? When? Now. 20 minutes later, Damian stood in Quinn's office looking at a photograph of a dormitory wall, at the names scratched into plaster, at one name in particular, Lucia. Could be a different Lucia, Quinn said gently. It's not an uncommon name. How old would she have been? If she was there. The facility's been operating for 12 years. Your sister disappeared 15 years ago. Timeline doesn't quite match. Unless they moved locations, upgraded, changed names. Possible. Quinn pulled out another file. We're running DNA on remains found on the property. 3 bodies buried in the woods behind the facility, all female, all young. If your sister's one of them, Damian's hands clenched. How long until you know? 2 weeks. Maybe less if we prioritize the samples. He stared at the photograph, at his sister's name carved into a wall by fingernails or desperate hope. After 15 years of searching, of dead ends and cold trails, this was the closest he'd come to an answer. If it's her, he said quietly, if she was there and I didn't find her, if she died while I was building my empire and playing power games. Then you did what you could with the information you had, Quinn interrupted, and you saved 37 girls who would have ended up just like her. That has to count for something. Does it? Yes. Quinn's voice was firm. Alara's alive because you believed her. Sophia's going home to her family because you called me. Maya and Caroline and 34 other girls are getting a second chance because you didn't look away. Your sister would be proud of that. Damian didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at the photograph, thinking about all the ways guilt and grief could shape a life. I'll call you when we have DNA results, Quinn said. Until then, try not to torture yourself with what-ifs. That's all I have. No. You also have the knowledge that you stopped this. That because one girl ran into your restaurant, an entire trafficking network is burning to the ground. After Damian left, Quinn returned to the evidence room where files from Clearwater Hills covered every available surface. Lists of victims, buyers, transactions, a paper trail of horror meticulously documented by people who never thought they'd be caught. Chen appeared in the doorway. U.S. Attorney wants a meeting. They're ready to start issuing indictments. How many? 63, including Senator Morrison. Quinn smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Good. Let's end some careers. As the sun set on a day that had started with a raid and would end with powerful people realizing their protection had failed, Alara sat in the safe house and wrote in a journal Officer Park had given her. She wrote about rain and running, about a restaurant and a man who'd believed her when no one else would, about 37 girls waking up in hospitals instead of cells, about the long, hard road ahead, and at the bottom of the page in handwriting that was still shaky but getting stronger, she wrote, Day 1 of freedom. Everything starts now. The indictments came down like hammers over the next 72 hours. State Senator Richard Morrison was arrested at his office in the Capitol building, led out in handcuffs past a gauntlet of cameras and reporters shouting questions he refused to answer. Judge Patricia Whitmore turned herself in with 3 lawyers flanking her, her face a mask of composure that cracked only when the charges were read aloud in open court. Captain Daniel Hayes barricaded himself in his home for 6 hours before SWAT talked him out, and CEO Marcus Thornton was apprehended at the airport trying to board a private jet to a country with no extradition treaty. The media feeding frenzy was relentless. Every news outlet ran continuous coverage. Social media exploded with outrage and demands for justice. Victims' rights groups held vigils. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from anyone connected to the scandal. And through it all, Alara watched from the safe house, seeing her nightmare transformed into headlines that people would discuss over breakfast and forget by dinner. "You should turn it off," Officer Park suggested gently, finding Alara on the couch at 2 in the morning, still watching news coverage. "This isn't healthy." "I need to see it." Alara's voice was distant. "I need to know it's real, that they're actually being held accountable." "They are." The U.S. Attorney has filed charges against 63 people. The FBI is coordinating with international agencies to track down overseas buyers. This is happening. Victor's lawyers are saying he's innocent, that I'm mentally ill, that this is all a delusion. Park sat beside her. Victor's lawyers are doing their job, but the evidence isn't delusional. 37 victims aren't delusional. Financial records and client lists aren't delusional. They can spin whatever story they want. It won't change the truth. Alara hugged her knees to her chest. What if the jury believes them? What if they look at Victor in his expensive suit with his respectable career and his expert witnesses, and then they look at me, some broken teenager with no credibility, and decide he's telling the truth? Then we make sure they hear from all 37 victims. We make sure they see the evidence. We make sure the truth is so loud, so clear, so undeniable that no amount of expensive lawyers can drown it out. I'm scared. I know. Being scared means you understand what's at stake, but you're not alone in this. Alara looked at Park, this officer who'd stayed by her side for days, who'd brought her food and journals and patience, who'd listened to her nightmares at 3 a.m. and never once suggested she was being dramatic. Why are you doing this? Alara asked. You could be home with your family. Instead, you're babysitting a trafficking victim who can't sleep and won't stop watching the news. Park smiled sadly. Because 15 years ago, I was you. Different circumstances, different traffickers, but the same terror, the same certainty that no one would believe me. And someone did. A detective who could have dismissed my story but didn't. She saved my life. So now I do the same for others. Alara stared at her. You were trafficked? For 8 months when I was 17. Runaways are easy targets. No one's looking for you. No one reports you missing. I was picked up at a bus station, promised a job, and a place to stay. By the time I realized what was happening, I was 3 states away from anyone who knew my name. How did you escape? I didn't. A police raid shut down the operation. Pure luck. They were investigating something else and stumbled onto us. I was one of 6 girls they recovered that night. Park's eyes were distant, remembering. The detective who interviewed me saw through all my lies, all my fear, all the conditioning that told me police were the enemy. She got me into witness protection, into therapy, into a program that helped me finish school. She's the reason I became a cop. To save other people. To be the person I needed when I was 17 and terrified. Park turned to face Alara directly. You're going to get through this. It'll be hard. Some days you'll want to give up. But you'll survive because survival is what you do. It's who you are. Alara wiped tears from her face. I don't feel like a survivor. I feel like a victim. You're both. And eventually, if you choose, you'll be something else too. A voice, an advocate. Someone who helps the next girl who runs through the rain looking for someone to believe her. The words settled into Alara's chest like seeds waiting to grow. Across town, in the county jail where Victor Dane was being held without bail, the psychiatrist sat in an attorney meeting room with 3 lawyers who'd collectively billed more hours than most people worked in a year. The evidence is substantial, said the lead attorney, Marcus Webb, a man whose reputation for getting guilty people acquitted was legendary. They have financial records, victim testimony, physical evidence from the facility. This isn't a case we can simply dismiss. Then discredit the victims, Victor said calmly. They're traumatized, unreliable, easily manipulated. Half of them have mental health issues. Their testimony is worthless. All 37 of them? Webb raised an eyebrow. You think a jury will believe 37 different girls all fabricated the same story? I think a jury will believe that traumatized teenagers, isolated in a facility and subjected to leading questions by overzealous investigators, can be manipulated into believing anything. Victor leaned forward. We position this as a witch hunt, mass hysteria, false memory syndrome. There's precedent. There's also photographs with prices on them found in your car. Research materials for a book I was writing about trafficking. Ledgers documenting sales. Financial records from the facility, which I ran as a legitimate psychiatric hospital. Victim testimony describing specific abuses. Victor smiled. It was the same smile he'd used on Alara, on Sophia, on Maya and Caroline and dozens of other girls. The smile that said he was in control, that he was untouchable, that the rules didn't apply to him. Testimony from mentally ill patients who were receiving psychiatric treatment. Their perceptions are inherently unreliable. Webb studied his client with the cold assessment of a man who'd defended monsters before and would again. You understand that if we go to trial with this strategy, you'll be painting yourself as a dedicated doctor who is helping troubled girls, while the prosecution paints you as a predator who destroyed lives for profit. It's a credibility battle, which I'll win, because I'm a respected psychiatrist with a 20-year career and they're damaged teenagers with questionable mental health. Victor's confidence was absolute. Trust me, I've been building my reputation specifically for moments like this. What about the other defendants? Morrison, Whitmore, Hayes? They're going to start making deals, trading testimony for reduced sentences. Let them. Their testimony will be self-serving and contradictory. It'll create reasonable doubt. And Margaret Chen, Dr. Ross? Victor's expression hardened. They know better than to talk. They understand what happens to people who cooperate with prosecutors. Webb's pen paused on his legal pad. Are you threatening witnesses? I'm stating facts. Margaret and Michael are intelligent people who understand loyalty. They won't betray the network. The network is already burned, Webb said bluntly. Clearwater Hills is shut down. Your clients are arrested. Your operation is finished. The question now is whether you spend 30 years in prison or life. The question is whether any of this evidence is admissible in court. Victor's voice turned cold, showing the predator beneath the respectable facade. I want you to file motions challenging every search, every seizure, every piece of evidence they collected. I want you to depose every victim and find contradictions in their stories. I want you to drag this investigation through so much legal mud that by the time we get to trial, the jury is exhausted and confused. That's the strategy? Exhaust and confuse? That's always the strategy. Justice isn't about truth. It's about which story the jury believes. And I've spent 20 years perfecting my story. Webb gathered his files. I'll do what I can. But Victor, the evidence against you is damning. If the prosecution offers a deal, no deals, we fight this all the way. After the lawyers left, Victor sat alone in the meeting room, his mind already working through contingencies. He'd built his operation with layers of protection specifically for scenarios like this. Offshore accounts the FBI hadn't found yet. Evidence caches hidden in locations only he knew. Insurance files containing information that could destroy careers and lives if released. He wasn't beaten. He was simply adapting to changed circumstances. While Victor planned his defense, Detective Quinn sat in a conference room with Agent Mitchell and the U.S. attorney assigned to the case, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Reeves, who'd built her career prosecuting white-collar criminals and corrupt officials. Dane's going to fight, Reeves said, reviewing case files. No plea negotiations, no cooperation. He thinks he can win at trial. Can he? Quinn asked. Depends on the jury. Depends on how well his lawyers execute. Depends on whether our victims can withstand cross-examination without falling apart. Reeves looked up. How solid is Alara Vale? Solid. Scared, but solid. She's got details, dates, names. She's consistent. Dane's lawyers will attack her mental health. Claim she's delusional, suggestible, unreliable. Can she handle that? Quinn thought about Alara writing in her journal at 3 a.m., about the way she watched news coverage like she was witnessing her own funeral, about the fragility beneath her determination. She can handle it. with support. What about the other victims? Agent Mitchell pulled up files on her laptop. We've interviewed all 37 girls recovered from Clearwater Hills. 23 are willing to testify. The others are too traumatized or too young. We also have 6 victims from earlier operations who've come forward since the arrests. That gives us 29 potential witnesses, Reeves calculated, more than enough to establish a pattern. But we need to be strategic about who actually testifies. Too many witnesses and the jury gets overwhelmed. Too few and Dane's lawyers can claim they're outliers. I recommend we lead with Alara, Quinn said. She's the catalyst. Her escape triggered everything. She's articulate, detailed, and her story is compelling. Agreed. Who else? Sophia Martinez. 15, recovered from the facility, clear memory of intake procedures and daily operations. Maya Chen for medical testimony. She can describe Dr. Ross's experiments. And Caroline Bradshaw because she's the youngest and her story will gut the jury. Reeves made notes. What about the buyers? Can any victims identify them? 4 girls can identify Senator Morrison. He visited the facility multiple times, participated in auctions. 2 can identify Judge Whitmore. Apparently she had specific preferences. And we have documentary evidence linking Hayes and Thornton to transactions. Documentary evidence is good, but victim testimony is better. Juries connect with people, not paperwork. Mitchell leaned forward. We also have Margaret Chen's financial records. She kept meticulous books, every transaction, every payment, every buyer. It's a prosecutor's dream. Unless her lawyers successfully challenge how we obtained those records, Reeves cautioned. Dane's team is already filing suppression motions. They're arguing the initial search was illegal, that Moretti detained Dane without cause, that everything found afterward is fruit of the poisonous tree. Quinn's jaw tightened. The search was legal. We had probable cause based on Alara's testimony and the photographs found in Dane's car, which Moretti obtained through what Dane's lawyers are calling an illegal detention and search. Moretti is a private citizen. Fourth Amendment doesn't apply to him. True, but if we knew Moretti was illegally detaining Dane and we used that time to build our case, defense can argue we were complicit. Reeves sighed. It's a technicality, but technicalities win cases. So what do? We make sure every piece of evidence has an independent source. The raid on Clearwater Hills was based on Alara's testimony and the photographs, both of which would have been discovered regardless of how long Moretti held Dane. The financial records came from warrants based on probable cause. The victim statements are voluntary. We can survive the suppression motions. And if we can't? Reeves met Quinn's eyes. Then we build the case on victim testimony alone, which is risky, but possible. Agent Mitchell closed her laptop. What about the international buyers, the ones who weren't arrested? Interpol's tracking them. Dubai police have Omar al-Rahman under surveillance. But realistically, most of them will never see the inside of an American courtroom. We focus on the defendants we can actually prosecute. The meeting continued for 3 more hours, each attorney and investigator picking apart the case from every angle, anticipating defense strategies, shoring up weaknesses. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and Quinn's head was pounding. She returned to the precinct to find Chen waiting with news. DNA results came back on the remains found at Clearwater Hills, he said quietly. Quinn's heart seized. And? None of them are Lucia Moretti. Relief and disappointment warred in Quinn's chest. You're sure? Positive match was run against Damien's DNA. No familial relationship to any of the 3 victims. They're still working on identifying who they were, but they're not his sister. Does he know? I called him 20 minutes ago. He didn't say much, just asked if we were still looking. Quinn thought about the crime boss who'd spent 15 years searching for a ghost. What did you tell him? That we'd keep her file active, that every Jane Doe we find gets checked against her profile, that we're not giving up. Good. Quinn grabbed her jacket. I need to talk to Alara, update her on the case strategy. She found Alara in the safe house backyard, sitting on a bench and staring at the sky. Officer Park stood discreetly nearby, giving her space but staying close. Heard you had a rough night, Quinn said, sitting beside her. Every night is rough. Alara didn't look away from the stars. I keep dreaming I'm back there, in that room, waiting to be sold. Then I wake up, and for a few seconds I can't remember if I escaped or if that's the dream. The escape was real. This is real. You're safe. Am I? Victor's lawyers are already attacking me in the media, calling me mentally unstable, saying I made everything up. How is that safe? Quinn chose her words carefully. Victor's going to fight dirty. His lawyers will say terrible things about you, about the other victims, about anyone who threatens his freedom. It's going to hurt, but it's also desperation. They know the evidence is damning, so they're trying to win in the court of public opinion before the trial even starts. Is it working? Some people will believe them. Some people always believe the powerful over the powerless, but the jury won't be selected from Twitter. They'll be shown evidence, hear testimony, and make their decision based on facts. Alara finally looked at her. The U.S. attorney wants me to testify. She does. You're our strongest witness, but it's your choice. No one will force you. What happens if I say no? We use other witnesses, build the case around other victims. You get to heal in private instead of on a witness stand. And Victor? We still prosecute him with everything we have, but without your testimony, the case is weaker. His lawyers will argue that the girl who started this whole investigation is too scared to face him. They'll use your absence to create doubt. Alara wrapped her arms around herself. So if I don't testify, I'm letting him win. And if I do testify, I have to sit in a courtroom and relive everything while his lawyers call me a liar. Yes. Quinn didn't soften it. Both choices are hard. Both choices have consequences, but one choice means hiding from the truth, and the other means standing in it. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You ran 2 miles barefoot in the rain rather than be sold. You're strong enough. They sat in silence, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the city, Victor Dane was plotting his defense. Somewhere else, 36 other victims were making the same choice Alara faced: testify and be torn apart on cross-examination, or stay silent and watch their abuser walk free. If I do this, Alara said slowly, if I testify, I need to know it matters, that it's not just theater, that there's actually a chance of justice. But I can't promise you justice, Quinn said honestly. I can promise you that we'll fight for it, that we'll put every resource, every hour, every ounce of determination into making sure Victor Dane faces consequences for what he did. But juries are unpredictable. Trials go wrong. Sometimes monsters go free despite our best efforts. Then why do it? Why put victims through hell if there's no guarantee? Because sometimes monsters don't go free. Sometimes truth wins. Sometimes 12 strangers look at the evidence and choose to believe a scared teenager over a respected psychiatrist. And when that happens, when justice actually works the way it's supposed to, it changes everything. Alara stood, pacing the small yard. I keep thinking about the other girls. Sophia going home to her family, Maya getting a second chance, Caroline finally being safe. If I don't testify, if I let fear win, what does that say to them? It says you're human. No one would blame you for protecting yourself. I would blame me. Alara stopped pacing, decision crystallizing in her eyes. I'll do it. I'll testify. Not because I'm brave or strong or any of those things people keep saying, but because I survived. And survival means something. It has to mean something. Quinn stood and pulled a business card from her pocket. This is Dr. Lisa Chen. She's a trauma specialist who works with trafficking victims. She'll help prepare you for testimony, teach you coping strategies for the courtroom, work with you on managing anxiety during cross-examination. More therapy? Different therapy. This is practical. Dr. Chen doesn't want to talk about your childhood or your feelings. She wants to make sure you can sit on that witness stand without falling apart. Alara took the card. When does trial start? Jury selection begins in 6 weeks. Testimony probably starts 2 weeks after that. Between now and then, you'll meet with Dr. Chen, with the prosecutors, with investigators, as they refine the case. It's going to be intense. More intense than the last 2 years? Different intense. But yes, probably just as hard. Alara nodded slowly, accepting the weight of what she'd agreed to. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think Damian Moretti's sister was at Clearwater Hills? That name on the wall, do you think it was her? Quinn had wondered when this question would come. DNA says no. The remains we found weren't her. But the name could be a different Lucia, could be someone using a fake name, could be anything. Quinn paused. But we're still looking. Every victim we identify, every record we process, we're checking against her description. If she was in the system, we'll find her. And if she wasn't, if she's just gone, then she's one more ghost haunting this case, one more reason to make sure no other sisters disappear. Alara looked back at the stars. He saved my life, you know. Moretti. Everyone says he's dangerous, that he's a criminal, that I should be afraid of him, but he's the only person who believed me immediately, who didn't need proof or documentation or expert testimony. He just looked at me and knew. Sometimes the people we're told to fear are the ones who save us, Quinn said quietly. And sometimes the respectable people destroy us. The world's more complicated than we want it to be. Has he asked about me? Moretti? Twice. Wanted to know if you were safe, if you had everything you needed. I told him you were protected. Can I see him? Thank him? Quinn hesitated. That's complicated. He's a witness in this case. Any contact between you two could be construed as witness tampering or coordination. Dane's lawyers would use it to suggest your testimony was coached. So the man who saved my life is now someone I can't even talk to. Until after the trial. After you testify and the case is concluded. Then you can thank him all you want. Alara laughed bitterly. The justice system is so worried about protecting the accused that it punishes the victims. I can't talk to the person who helped me, but Victor gets 3 expensive lawyers and media interviews where he calls me crazy. I know, it's not fair, but it's the system we have. We work within it because it's the only path to holding him accountable. Inside the safe house, Officer Park's phone rang. She answered, listened, then called out, Quinn, you need to see this. They went inside to find Park holding her phone, news coverage playing on the screen. A reporter stood outside the courthouse where preliminary hearings were being held. In a shocking development, the reporter said, attorneys for Margaret Chen, former administrator of Clearwater Hills facility, have announced that their client is seeking a plea agreement with prosecutors. Sources say Chen is prepared to testify against Dr. Victor Dane and provide detailed information about the trafficking operation in exchange for reduced charges. This represents the first major break in what prosecutors are calling the largest trafficking case in state history. Quinn felt a slow smile spread across her face. Victor said Chen would never talk. Looks like he was wrong. What does this mean? Alara asked. It means we just got an insider witness, someone who can testify to the operational details, the financial arrangements, the buyer lists, someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. Quinn pulled out her phone, already dialing the U.S. Attorney's office. This changes everything. While Quinn coordinated with prosecutors about Margaret Chen's potential cooperation, across town in his restaurant office, Damian Moretti read the same news with very different thoughts. Marco stood by the window, watching the street below. Chen's talking. That's going to create problems for a lot of powerful people. Good. Let them suffer. Some of those powerful people might decide to solve their problems permanently. Chen in custody is protected, but witnesses have accidents. Suicides. Mysterious deaths that can't be proven, but everyone understands. Damien looked up from his tablet. You think someone's going to try to silence her? I think someone's going to try to silence all of them. Chen, the victims, maybe even Alara. Marco's voice was grim. These aren't street-level criminals. They're senators and judges and police captains, people with resources and connections, people who know how to make problems disappear. Then we make sure they can't. Boss, we're already in deep with this. You detained Dane, you involved yourself in a federal investigation, you're calling Quinn every other day for updates. At some point, this becomes our problem instead of theirs. Damien stood, walking to the window to look out at the city he'd spent 20 years controlling through fear and careful violence. It became our problem the moment Alara ran through that kitchen door. You want me to step back now? Let whatever happens happen? I want you to remember that we're not heroes. We're criminals who happen to have found one moral line we won't cross. That doesn't make us good guys. No, but it makes us useful guys. And right now those victims need protection that the police can't provide. Marco sighed. What are you planning? I'm planning to make sure anyone who thinks about silencing witnesses understands the cost. Judges and senators bleed just like everyone else. They die just like everyone else. And if they threaten people under my protection, they'll learn that very personally. Under your protection? When did you decide Alara and the others were your responsibility? Damien thought about Lucia's name scratched on a dormitory wall, about 15 years of searching and failing, about one scared girl who'd given him a chance to save someone when he couldn't save his sister. The moment I believed her, he said quietly, she's mine to protect now. They all are. Marco studied his boss, seeing the dangerous shift happening. You're getting emotionally invested. That makes you vulnerable. I've been vulnerable for 15 years. At least now I'm doing something about it. And when this case goes to trial, when Alara testifies and Dane's lawyers tear her apart, when the jury might acquit despite the evidence, what then? Damien's expression went cold. Then I handle it differently. Boss, I'm not letting him walk, Marco. I don't care what the jury says. I don't care what the legal system decides. That man destroyed dozens of lives. If justice fails, I'll provide it myself. That's murder. That's protection. There's a difference. They stared at each other, the line between crime boss and vigilante blurring in ways that made Marco deeply uncomfortable. Just promise me you'll wait until after the trial, Marco finally said. Give the system a chance to work. I'll wait, but I'm preparing for failure. What do you need? Information on Dane's lawyers, their schedules, their routines, their vulnerabilities, information on the jurors once they're selected, background on the judge, everything that might give us leverage if we need it. That's jury tampering, witness intimidation. That's insurance. Marco nodded slowly, accepting that his boss had crossed a line he'd been walking for years. I'll get started. After Marco left, Damien stood alone in his office, looking at the photograph Quinn had sent him, the dormitory wall with Lucia's name. The DNA results had proven it wasn't his sister. But somewhere, some girl named Lucia had been afraid enough to carve her name into plaster. Some girl had hoped someone would see it and remember her. He couldn't save that Lucia, couldn't save his own sister. But he could save Alara and Sophia and Maya and Caroline and the 33 others who'd survived. And if the legal system failed them, if judges and juries and lawyers let Victor Dane walk free, then Damien would do what he did best. He'd make sure the monster never hurt anyone again. The trial was coming. Truth was about to face lies in a courtroom where evidence and emotion would battle for 12 strangers' belief. And in a city that held too many secrets, in a system that protected the powerful more than the vulnerable, in a world where justice was a luxury the rich could afford to avoid, one terrified girl was about to stand up and speak truth to power. The question was whether anyone would listen. The courthouse steps were packed with media on the first day of trial. Cameras jostled for position. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who approached, and protesters held signs demanding justice for victims, while counter-protesters claimed the charges were fabricated. The circus atmosphere made Alara's stomach turn as Officer Park guided her through a side entrance, away from the chaos. Inside, the hallways were quieter, but no less tense. Victims and their families clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed voices. Defense attorneys moved with confident strides, expensive suits, and leather briefcases announcing their certainty. Prosecutors carried boxes of evidence, their faces set with grim determination. U.S. Attorney Catherine Reeves found Alara in a private witness room and sat down across from her with the calm authority that had won her dozens of high-profile cases. "You ready?" Reeves asked. "No." Alara's honesty was stark. "But I'm here anyway. That's all we need. Remember what Dr. Chen taught you. Breathe, pause before answering. Don't let the defense attorneys rush you. You're not on trial. Victor is." "Then why does it feel like I'm the one being judged?" "Because in some ways you are. Defense attorneys will try to make this about your credibility instead of Victor's crimes. They'll suggest you're lying, confused, manipulated. Your job is to tell the truth calmly and let the evidence speak for itself." Through the window, Alara could see the courtroom filling with spectators. She spotted Sophia's parents in the gallery, holding hands tightly. Maya sat with a victim advocate, her eyes wide and frightened. Caroline was too young to attend, but her statement would be read by prosecutors. "The jury's been selected," Reeves continued. 7 women, 5 men, mix of ages and backgrounds. 3 have children, which helps us. 2 work in healthcare. which could go either way. They might understand psychiatric manipulation, or they might defer to Victor's expertise. What about the judge? Judge Harold Morrison, no relation to Senator Morrison. He's fair, experienced, doesn't tolerate grandstanding from either side. We could have done worse. Officer Park knocked on the door. 5 minutes. Laura stood smoothing down the conservative dress Reeves had helped her choose. Professional, modest, the kind of outfit that said credible witness rather than damaged victim. Her hands shook slightly, but she forced them still. One more thing, Reeves said. Margaret Chen testified yesterday during pretrial motions. Her testimony was devastating. She described the operational details, confirmed the client lists, admitted to personally coordinating sales. Dane's lawyers tried to discredit her, but the jury saw her financial records. They saw the proof. Did she mention me? She said you were one of the most resistant victims, that Victor spent 2 years trying to break you because you refused to be compliant, that your escape triggered everything. Reeves smiled slightly. She meant it as criticism, but it came across as exactly what it was, proof that you're a survivor, not a willing participant. The courtroom was standing room only when they entered. Alara walked to the witness stand with Officer Park beside her, aware of every eye tracking her movement. The jury sat in their box, 12 strangers who would decide whether her truth mattered. Victor sat at the defense table, flanked by his lawyers, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and an expression of sorrowful concern, as if he pitied her delusions. Their eyes met for a moment. Victor smiled gently, the same smile he'd used when he'd told her the buyer was coming, when he'd assured her the drugs would make everything easier, when he'd promised her that resistance was futile. Alara looked away first, focusing instead on the American flag in the corner, on the judge's bench, on anything except the man who'd owned her for 2 years. The bailiff swore her in. She placed her hand on the Bible and promised to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The words felt both sacred and impossibly heavy. Reeves approached the witness stand with calm professionalism. Please state your name for the record. Alara Marie Vale. How old are you, Alara? 18. And how do you know the defendant, Dr. Victor Dane? Alara took a breath, remembering Dr. Chen's coaching. Breathe, pause, answer clearly. He was my stepfather. He married my mother when I was 16. Can you describe your relationship with him before your mother's death? Distant. He was polite, but not warm. My mother was happy, so I tried to accept him. But I never felt comfortable around him. Why not? The way he looked at me, the way he'd touch my shoulder or my hair when my mother wasn't watching, the way he'd ask questions about my friends, my schedule, my plans. It felt wrong, but I couldn't explain why. Victor's lead attorney, Marcus Webb, made a note. Alara knew he was cataloging everything she said, preparing to twist it later. What happened after your mother died? Reeves asked. Victor said I was having a breakdown from grief, that I needed professional help. He took me to Clearwater Hills and told me it was a psychiatric facility that specialized in grief counseling. Her voice stayed steady. It wasn't. What was it? A prison. A holding facility where girls were kept until they could be sold. Objection. Webb stood. The witness is characterizing an entire facility based on her subjective interpretation. There's no foundation for this claim. Judge Morrison looked at Reeves. Sustained. Ms. Vale, please limit your testimony to what you personally observed and experienced. Alara nodded. Reeves continued. Tell the jury what you personally observed at Clearwater Hills. I was put in a dormitory with 12 other girls, ages 14 to 19. We were given medication 3 times a day that made us foggy and compliant. We weren't allowed phones, computers, or contact with the outside world. Guards watched us constantly. Doors were locked from the outside. Did Dr. Dane visit you there? Twice in 2 years, both times he brought men with him. Wealthy men from overseas. They would walk through the facility looking at us like we were merchandise. What happened during these visits? Alara's hands clenched in her lap. The men would ask questions, our ages, our education, whether we spoke other languages. They would touch our hair, our faces, our arms. Dr. Dane would stand beside them and answer questions about our health, our compliance levels, our training. Did you understand what was happening? Not at first, But the other girls explained, we were being auctioned. The men were buyers. We were the product. Objection! Webb was on his feet. This is hearsay and speculation. The witness has no direct knowledge of any alleged auction. Your Honor, Reeves countered, the witness is testifying to what she was told by other victims and what she directly observed during these visits. It goes to her state of mind and understanding of the situation. I'll allow it, Morrison ruled, but Ms. Reeves, please establish a foundation for any claims about actual sales. Reeves nodded. Alara, did you ever hear Dr. Dane discuss sales with anyone? Yes. 3 months ago, I overheard him on the phone in his study. I'd been transferred from the facility to his house for what he called specialized training. I was supposed to be in my room, but I snuck out to try to find a phone. She paused, breathing. He was talking to someone about a buyer from Dubai, said the price was agreed upon, that transport was arranged, that the girl, meaning me, was almost ready. What did you do? I went back to my room and started planning my escape. I knew I had limited time. Once the buyer arrived, I'd be gone forever. Tell the jury about the night you escaped. Alara described the bathroom window, the 2-mile run through rain, the desperate search for help. She described crashing through the restaurant's back door, collapsing in front of Damian Moretti, watching Victor follow her inside with his practiced concern and polished lies. What did Mr. Moretti do when Dr. Dane claimed you were his mentally ill stepdaughter? He asked me one question, just one. He asked if I knew Victor. Alara's voice caught slightly. I said yes, that Victor was the one who'd been selling me, and Mr. Moretti believed me immediately. Why do you think he believed you? Objection, Webb said. Calls for speculation about another person's thoughts. Withdrawn. Reeves shifted direction. What happened after you told Mr. Moretti the truth? He called Detective Quinn. He detained Victor until the police arrived. He gave Detective Quinn the photographs from Victor's car, photographs of girls with prices attached to them. He saved my life. Reeves pulled up the photographs on a screen visible to the jury. 12 faces, 12 prices, 12 victims. Do you recognize these photographs? Yes. That's the intake room at Clearwater Hills. That's where they photographed us for the website. What website? The one buyers used to browse inventory. I never saw it myself, but the guards talked about it. They said we were cataloged by age, appearance, skills, languages. Do you see yourself in these photographs? Alara pointed to the third image. That's me. 2 years ago when I first arrived at the facility. The jury stared at the photograph of a 16-year-old girl, terrified and alone, with a price of $75,000 beneath her image. Reeves let the silence stretch, let the jury absorb what they were seeing. Then she continued, walking Alara through 2 years of captivity in methodical detail. The medications that kept them compliant. The punishments for resistance. The fake therapy sessions designed to make them doubt their own memories. The other girls who'd disappeared after being sold. The burial in the woods of Jessica, who'd tried to escape and died 3 days later. By the time Reeves finished her direct examination, 3 hours had passed and several jurors were wiping tears from their faces. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Morrison called for a recess. Alara stood on shaking legs, Officer Park immediately at her side. You did great, Park whispered. Cross-examination will be harder, but you got the truth on record. That's what matters. In the hallway during the break, Alara saw Sophia and her parents. Sophia broke away from them and hugged Alara tightly. You were so brave, Sophia said. So strong. I'm testifying tomorrow and I'm terrified, but watching you made me think maybe I can do it too. You can, Alara assured her. We all can, because we're not alone anymore. Maya joined them, then 2 other victims Alara recognized from Clearwater Hills. They stood together in a small cluster of survivors, drawing strength from each other's presence. Detective Quinn approached with Reeves. Cross-examination is about to start. Alara, remember, Webb's job is to create doubt. He'll try to confuse you, anger you, make you seem unreliable. Don't let him. Just answer the questions truthfully, and don't take the bait when he tries to provoke you. What kind of questions will he ask? He'll attack your mental health, suggest the medications you were given caused hallucinations or false memories, imply that you're lying for attention or money or revenge. He'll try to make the jury question everything you just testified to. But it's all true. We know that. The evidence proves that. But his job is to make the jury wonder if maybe, possibly, there's another explanation. Quinn's voice was steady. You've already won by telling your story. Now you just have to survive his version of it. Back in the courtroom, Marcus Webb stood to begin cross-examination. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, with a grandfatherly manner that masked a ruthless legal mind. Miss Vale, he began gently, I know this is difficult for you, so I'll try to be brief. You testified that you were given medication at Clearwater Hills 3 times a day, correct? Yes. Do you know what medications you were given? No, they never told us. So you were taking unknown substances for 2 years? We didn't have a choice. But you don't actually know what you were taking. It could have been antipsychotics, anti-anxiety medication, mood stabilizers, any number of legitimate psychiatric medications, correct? I guess so. And these medications made you, in your words, foggy and compliant. Is that right? Yes. Foggy, meaning your thinking wasn't clear, your memories might not be reliable, your perceptions might have been altered by the drugs. Alara saw where he was going. The drugs made it harder to resist, but I remember everything clearly. Do you? Because medication-induced confusion is a documented side effect of many psychiatric drugs. Isn't it possible that some of what you remember is distorted by the medications you were taking? No, I remember what happened to me. Webb smiled sympathetically. I'm sure you believe that. But belief and objective reality aren't always the same thing, are they? Especially when powerful psychiatric medications are involved. Objection, Reeves said, argumentative, and calls for speculation about medication effects without expert testimony. Sustained, Webb shifted tactics. You testified that Dr. Dane was your stepfather, that he married your mother when you were 16. Yes. And your mother died 8 months later in a car accident. Yes. That must have been devastating for you. Ilara's throat tightened. It was. Traumatic, grief-inducing, the kind of loss that might cause someone to break down emotionally. I was sad, but I wasn't. In fact, Dr. Dane has provided medical records showing that after your mother's death, you exhibited signs of severe depression, anxiety, and dissociative episodes. Were you aware of these diagnoses? Those records are fake. He made them up to justify sending me to Clearwater Hills, or they're legitimate assessments from a licensed psychiatrist who was genuinely concerned about his stepdaughter's mental health. Webb pulled out documents. I have here evaluations from 3 different mental health professionals, all documenting your declining mental state after your mother's death, all recommending intensive psychiatric care. They're all connected to Victor. They're all part of the network. Or they're independent professionals who all reached the same conclusion because the evidence supported it. Webb's voice remained gentle, reasonable. Isn't it possible, Ms. Vale, that you were genuinely suffering from psychiatric illness and that Dr. Dane was trying to help you? No, that's not what happened. But you were medicated, confused, grieving. Your perceptions were altered. Isn't it possible that you misinterpreted legitimate psychiatric treatment as something sinister? I didn't misinterpret anything. I was there. I know what they did. Do you? Or do you know what you believe they did, filtered through medication, trauma, and the suggestions of other disturbed patients? Ilara's hands were shaking now. Webb was twisting everything, making her sound crazy, making the truth sound like delusion. The photographs, she said. The ones in Victor's car. Those are real. Those prove those photographs could be research materials for the book Dr. Dane was writing about trafficking. They could be case studies from his professional work. They don't prove any actual crime, do they? They have prices on them, according to the prosecution's interpretation. But the numbers could represent anything. Case numbers, file codes, research categories. Reeves stood. Your Honor, defense is testifying rather than questioning. May we remind counsel to ask questions instead of arguing his case? Sustained. Mr. Webb, questions only. Webb nodded. Ms. Vale, you testified about other victims at Clearwater Hills. Girls you claimed were also being held against their will. They were. Have you spoken with any of these girls since your escape? Some of them. And have you discussed your testimony with them? Coordinated your stories? We've talked about what happened to us, yes. So you've had multiple conversations where you reinforced each other's narratives, potentially creating a shared false memory. That's not what happened. But it's possible, isn't it, that a group of traumatized, medicated teenagers, isolated together for months or years, might develop a shared delusion about their circumstances? Objection! Reeves was on her feet. Defense is badgering the witness and making psychological arguments without expert foundation. Your Honor, Webb responded, I'm simply exploring alternative explanations for the witness's claims. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Webb. The cross-examination continued for another 2 hours. Webb attacked every detail of Alara's testimony, the timeline of events, her memory of specific conversations, her interpretation of Victor's actions. He suggested she was lying for attention, for money from potential book deals or movie rights, for revenge against a stepfather she'd never liked. By the time Judge Morrison finally called for the day's adjournment, Alara felt like she'd been filleted open and left bleeding on the witness stand. Officer Park escorted her out through the side entrance, away from cameras and questions. In the car, Alara broke down crying. He made me sound crazy, she sobbed. He made everything I said sound like lies or delusions. What if the jury believes him? They won't, Park said firmly, because tomorrow Reeves gets redirect examination. She'll rehabilitate your testimony, clarify the distortions, and remind the jury about the physical evidence that corroborates your story. Webb's job was to create doubt. Reeves's job is to restore truth, trust the process. But Alara couldn't trust anything. She'd just spent hours being called a liar in front of 12 strangers who would decide Victor's fate. She'd watched him sit there in his expensive suit, looking wounded and concerned, playing the victim of a disturbed girl's accusations. Back at the safe house, she found Detective Quinn waiting with Agent Mitchell. Margaret Chen's testimony continues tomorrow, Quinn said. She's providing detailed financial records showing payments from buyers to Victor's offshore accounts. She's naming names, senators, judges, businessmen who purchased girls from Clearwater Hills. The jury is going to hear evidence that backs up everything you said. What if it's not enough? Mitchell leaned forward. Then we keep fighting. We have 28 other victim witnesses ready to testify. We have Dr. Ross's records documenting the medications used to keep you compliant. We have the burial site where Jessica was found. We have bank records, client lists, communications logs. Webb can attack your credibility all he wants, but he can't attack facts. Facts didn't protect me for 2 years. Victor had facts, medical records, expert witnesses, respectable credentials. His facts beat my truth every time. Not this time, Quinn said, because now your truth has facts backing it up. Evidence, corroboration, multiple witnesses. That's what makes this different. Alara wanted to believe them. But she'd spent too long learning that the system protected powerful men and dismissed vulnerable girls. Webb's cross-examination had reinforced that lesson brutally. Across town, in Victor's holding cell, he met with his legal team for a strategy session. The girl's testimony was damaging, Webb admitted. Emotional, detailed, sympathetic. Several jurors were visibly moved. But you created doubt, Victor said confidently. Some. The mental health angle is working. I could see jurors considering the possibility that medication might have affected her perceptions. But Chen's testimony tomorrow is going to be a problem. Margaret will hold up. Actually, another attorney interjected, she's already started cooperating fully. She's provided prosecutors with everything, financial records going back a decade, client lists, operational details. She's trying to minimize her own sentence by maximizing yours. Victor's calm facade cracked slightly. That traitor. After everything I did for her, everything we built together, doesn't matter now, Webb interrupted. What matters is damage control. Can we discredit her testimony? She kept meticulous records. Every transaction is documented. Every client is named. Every payment is traced. The attorney sighed. Unless we can prove those records were fabricated, her testimony is going to be devastating. Then we prove they were fabricated. How? The FBI verified them against bank statements, tax records, corporate filings. They're real. Victor stood, pacing the small cell. What about the other defendants? Morrison, Whitmore, Hayes? Are any of them cooperating? Hayes is negotiating a plea. Morrison is maintaining innocence. Whitmore's lawyers are considering options. Webb pulled out notes. The problem is that too many people are starting to crack. They see the evidence piling up and they're trying to save themselves. Cowards. All of them. Or realists. Victor, I need to be frank with you. The evidence against you is substantial. Multiple victims corroborating each other's stories, financial records documenting sales, physical evidence from the facility, insider testimony from Chen. If we go to trial and lose, you're looking at consecutive sentences that add up to life without parole. And if we take a deal? Depends what the prosecution offers. But realistically, 30 to 40 years minimum. You'd be in your 90s before release. Victor sat back down, his mind calculating odds and options. What are our chances at trial? Honestly, 40-60 against us. Webb's cross-examination helped, but Reeves is competent and the evidence is strong. It's a gamble. I don't take gambles I can't control. Then we need to start considering alternatives. Plea negotiations, cooperation agreements, ways to minimize damage. No. Victor's voice was steel. I'm not spending the rest of my life in prison. I'm not letting these people destroy everything I built. Find another way. Webb exchanged glances with the other attorneys. There is no other way. We've explored every legal avenue. The evidence is too strong. Then explore illegal avenues. The room went quiet. Webb cleared his throat carefully. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, witnesses can be influenced. Jurors can be persuaded. Evidence can disappear. You're expensive lawyers who've gotten guilty people acquitted before. Do what you do. What you're suggesting is criminal. What you're suggesting is surrender. I won't do it. Webb gathered his files. I'll pretend I didn't hear that. And I strongly advise you to focus on legal strategies only. Anything else will only make your situation worse. After the lawyers left, Victor sat alone in his cell, fury building beneath his calm exterior. He'd spent 20 years building his operation, accumulating wealth and power, creating a network that should have been untouchable. And now it was all unraveling because one girl had run through the rain and found someone who believed her. But Victor hadn't survived this long by accepting defeat. He had resources his lawyers didn't know about, contacts who owed him favors, information that could destroy careers and lives if released. If the legal system wouldn't save him, he'd save himself. One way or another, this trial would end in his favor. The next morning, Margaret Chen took the witness stand. She wore an orange jumpsuit instead of her usual designer pantsuits, her wrists shackled, her face drawn. The woman who'd run Clearwater Hills with ruthless efficiency looked diminished, broken. Reeves approached her with professional courtesy. Ms. Chen, you've entered into a cooperation agreement with this office, correct? Yes. And as part of that agreement, you've agreed to testify truthfully about your role in the trafficking operation run by Dr. Victor Dane? Yes. How long did you work with Dr. Dane? 12 years, since Clearwater Hills opened. Describe your role. Chen's voice was flat, emotionless. I handled operations, financial transactions, staff management, buyer coordination, victim intake and processing. Victor was the public face, the respectable psychiatrist who gave the operation legitimacy. I was the one who made it actually function. How many victims passed through Clearwater Hills during those 12 years? 217 that I have documentation for. Possibly more in the early years before I implemented the record-keeping system. The number hit the courtroom like a physical blow. 217 lives destroyed. What happened to these victims? They were sold to buyers, wealthy men, primarily from overseas who paid between $50,000 and $200,000, depending on the victim's age, appearance, and other factors. Did Dr. Dane participate in these sales? He arranged them. He found the victims, brought them to the facility, managed their conditioning and training, negotiated prices with buyers, coordinated transport. Every sale was his operation. I just handled the paperwork. Reeves pulled up financial records on the screen. Are these your records? Chen studied them. Yes, those are the ledgers I kept documenting every transaction. Walk the jury through what we're seeing. Chen explained the spreadsheet. Victim names or case numbers, buyer identities or codes, sale prices, dates, payment methods. Every transaction meticulously documented because Margaret Chen, for all her crimes, had been thorough. Did you personally meet any of the buyers? Many of them. They would come to the facility to view the inventory before purchasing. Some had specific preferences: age, ethnicity, language skills. We would arrange private viewings. Did you know what these buyers intended to do with the girls they purchased? Of course, they were purchasing human beings for sexual exploitation. There was no other purpose. And you facilitated these transactions anyway? Yes. Why? Chen hesitated, the first crack in her flat affect. Money, power, and because I convinced myself that these girls were better off with wealthy buyers who would at least keep them alive than in other trafficking situations where they'd be worked to death in brothels. Did you believe that? I wanted to believe it. It made the job easier. Reeves spent 4 hours walking Chen through the operational details of Clearwater Hills. The jury heard about intake procedures, about how Victor would identify vulnerable girls, runaways, foster kids, girls who'd lost parents. They heard about the fake medical records used to justify holding them. They heard about the medications that kept them compliant. They heard about the guards who punished resistance with violence and isolation. Most devastatingly, they heard Chen name buyers: Senator Morrison, who'd purchased 3 girls over 5 years; Judge Whitmore, who'd had very specific preferences for young blonde girls who reminded her of a daughter she'd lost; Captain Hayes, who'd provided police protection in exchange for access to victims; CEO Thornton, who'd bought girls as gifts for business associates. By the time Reeves finished, the jury looked sickened. Several were crying openly. Marcus Webb stood for cross-examination. Ms. Chen, you're testifying here today because you've made a deal with prosecutors, correct? Yes. You're facing 40 felony charges that could result in life in prison, but by cooperating against Dr. Dane, you'll receive a reduced sentence of 15 to 20 years. Is that accurate? Yes. So you have a strong incentive to tell prosecutors what they want to hear. I'm telling the truth. Are you? Or are you exaggerating Dr. Dane's role while minimizing your own to make yourself look better? I'm not exaggerating anything. If anything, I'm downplaying how central Victor was to everything. You ran the day-to-day operations. You handled the money. You coordinated with buyers. Couldn't you have been running this entire operation while using Dr. Dane as a front? No, Victor found the victims, brought them in, made all major decisions. I was his employee, not his partner. An employee who's now trying to shift blame to avoid life in prison. Chen's voice hardened. I'm accepting responsibility for my role. But Victor Dane built this operation. He designed it. He profited from it. And if he's trying to pretend he was some innocent psychiatrist who didn't know what was happening at his own facility, he's lying. Webb tried for another hour to discredit Chen, to suggest she was lying or exaggerating or shifting blame. But her testimony held firm, backed by documents that couldn't be explained away. When she finally left the witness stand, the prosecution's case felt insurmountable. Over the next 3 days, the jury heard from more victims. Sophia testified about her intake, about being promised a boarding school and finding a prison. Maya described Dr. Ross's medication experiments, the combinations of drugs designed to create perfect compliance. Other girls described auctions, viewings, the moment they realized they were being sold like objects. Each testimony built on the others, creating a picture so damning that even Webb's aggressive cross-examinations couldn't shake it. On day 6, the prosecution rested. Webb immediately moved for dismissal, arguing the evidence was circumstantial and the victim testimony unreliable. Judge Morrison denied the motion. The defense case began with expert witnesses, psychiatrists who testified about false memory syndrome, about how traumatized patients could be led to believe fictionalized accounts of abuse. They talked about medication side effects, about the unreliability of recovered memories, about the dangers of suggestion and contamination in witness testimony. But Reeves was ready. She countered with her own experts who testified that while false memories were possible, they were rare and didn't explain physical evidence like burial sites, financial records, and photographic documentation. Victor never took the stand. Webb advised against it, knowing that cross-examination would destroy him. Instead, the defense rested on the argument that reasonable doubt existed. That maybe, possibly, there was another explanation for the evidence. That maybe Victor was a dedicated psychiatrist whose facility had been corrupted by subordinates like Margaret Chen. That maybe the victims were genuinely mentally ill and genuinely confused. It was a thin argument, but thin arguments had worked before when juries wanted to believe the respectable defendant over the damaged accusers. Closing arguments took 2 days. Reeves methodically walked through the evidence, connecting every piece to show a clear pattern of trafficking, exploitation, and abuse. Webb argued reasonable doubt, attacked witness credibility, and suggested alternative explanations. Then the jury got the case. They deliberated for 4 days. Alara spent those 4 days in the safe house, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to do anything except wait for 12 strangers to decide whether her truth mattered. On the 4th day, Officer Park's phone rang. They have a verdict. The courtroom was packed when Alara arrived. Victims filled the gallery. Media crowded every available seat. Damian Moretti sat in the back row, his presence a quiet reminder that some protectors didn't wear badges. Victor sat at the defense table, his face calm but his hands clenched tight. The jury filed in. None of them looked at Victor. Alara had read that was a bad sign for defendants. When juries couldn't meet the accused's eyes, it usually meant conviction. Judge Morrison addressed the foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of human trafficking in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit trafficking, how do you find? Guilty. The verdicts continued. Guilty on all 73 counts, kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy, fraud. Every charge, every count, guilty. Victor's calm facade shattered. He turned to Webb, who could only shake his head. Around the courtroom, victims were crying. Sophia hugged her parents. Maya was sobbing with relief. In the back row, Damian Moretti sat perfectly still, his eyes locked on Victor with an expression that promised the legal consequences were just the beginning. Alara felt like she was floating. 4 days of terror, 6 weeks of trial, 2 years of captivity, all leading to this moment. 12 strangers had listened to her story and believed her. Truth had won. Judge Morrison set sentencing for 3 weeks later and remanded Victor to custody. As guards led him away, Victor looked directly at Alara. This isn't over, he mouthed. Alara stared back, no longer afraid. Yes, it is. Outside the courthouse, media surrounded the prosecutors. Reeves gave a statement about justice for victims, about the importance of believing survivors, about sending a message that wealth and status didn't place anyone above the law. Alara stood to the side with Officer Park, watching the circus unfold. Detective Quinn found them. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Alara corrected. All of us. Every victim who testified, every investigator who built the case, every person who chose to believe us instead of dismissing us. What happens now? Alara thought about the question. What did happen now? Victor was convicted but not yet sentenced. The other defendants still faced trial. 37 victims were beginning the long process of healing, and she was 18 years old with no family, no home, and a trauma that would take years to process. Now I figure out who I am when I'm not just a victim, she said quietly. Now I start living instead of just surviving. Quinn squeezed her shoulder. You're going to be okay. I know. It'll take time, but I know. As the sun set on the courthouse steps, as media packed up their equipment and crowds dispersed, as victims and families began the next chapter of their lives, Alara stood for a moment in the fading light. She'd run through the rain 2 months ago, desperate and terrified and certain she would die. She'd crashed through a kitchen door and found an unlikely protector. She'd told her truth to police who finally listened. She'd testified in front of strangers who chose to believe her. And she'd won. The journey wasn't over. Sentencing still loomed. Healing would take years. Other battles waited. But tonight, standing on courthouse steps as a free person whose voice had mattered, Alara Vale allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. The 3 weeks between verdict and sentencing stretched like years. Alara spent them in a strange limbo, no longer a captive, not yet fully free, existing in the uncertain space between trauma and healing. The safe house had become familiar, almost comfortable, but she knew it was temporary. Eventually, she'd have to face the world outside, figure out where she belonged, decide who she wanted to become. Officer Park helped her apply for a GED program, since her education had been interrupted 2 years ago. A victim services counselor connected her with housing assistance and job training programs. Dr. Chen continued their therapy sessions, helping Alara process not just the abuse she'd survived, but the courtroom battle she'd endured. "You're allowed to feel relief without feeling guilty," Dr. Chen said during one session. "Survivor's guilt is normal, but it's not fair to yourself." I keep thinking about the girls who didn't make it," Alara admitted. "Jessica, who died trying to escape. The ones who were sold before the raid. The 217 victims Margaret Chen testified about. I survived, but they didn't. You survived because you were brave enough to run and lucky enough to find help. That's not your fault. And your survival gave voice to all those other victims. You testified for them too." "Did I? Or did I just testify for myself?" "Both. And that's okay. You don't have to carry the weight of everyone's story. Your own is heavy enough." Alara stared out the window at the autumn leaves falling from trees. "What happens after sentencing? After this is all really over?" "You get to decide. That's the gift of freedom, choice. You can go back to school, get a job, move to a new city, stay here and become an advocate. Whatever you choose, it's yours." "I don't know how to choose. For 2 years, every decision was made for me. What to wear, what to eat, where to go, what to say. I forgot how to want things." "Then start small. What do you want for dinner tonight?" The question was so simple it was almost absurd, but Alara realized she couldn't answer it. She'd been eating whatever Officer Park brought her, grateful for food but never considering preference. "I don't know," she whispered. "That's okay. Tomorrow you can try choosing breakfast, then lunch. Small decisions that remind you that your wants matter. Eventually, bigger choices won't feel so impossible." While Alara worked on remembering how to want things, the legal machinery ground forward. Senator Morrison pleaded guilty to 3 counts of trafficking and was sentenced to 25 years. Judge Whitmore went to trial, was convicted, and received 30 years. Captain Hayes accepted a plea deal for 18 years in exchange for testimony against other corrupt officers. CEO. Marcus Thornton fled the country, but was captured in Mexico and extradited to face charges. One by one, the powerful men who'd thought their money and status made them untouchable learned that some crimes couldn't be buried. Margaret Chen received her promised reduced sentence, 17 years with possibility of parole after 12. Dr. Michael Ross, the fake psychiatrist who'd experimented on victims, got 40 years without parole. Guards and staff from Clearwater Hills received sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years, depending on their level of involvement. The network that had operated for over a decade, that had destroyed over 200 lives, that had hidden behind respectability and forged documents, was dismantled piece by piece. But Victor Dane's sentencing was different. His was the case that had started everything, the catalyst that had brought the whole operation crashing down. His was the name that dominated headlines and sparked national conversations about trafficking, about believing victims, about how predators hide in plain sight. On the morning of sentencing, Alara woke before dawn. She dressed carefully in clothes Officer Park had helped her choose, professional but not formal, respectful but not submissive. She was done performing for other people's comfort. Detective Quinn picked her up at 7. "You ready for this?" "I think so. Do I have to speak?" "Only if you want to. Victims are allowed to give impact statements, but it's not required." "What would I say?" "Whatever you need to say. Whatever you want the judge to hear before he decides how long Victor spends in prison." Alara thought about all the things she could say, about 2 years of captivity, about being sold like merchandise, about watching Jessica die, about nightmares that still woke her screaming, about losing her mother and her freedom in the same year, about learning that the people who should protect you sometimes destroy you instead. "I want to speak," she decided. The courtroom was packed again, though this time the atmosphere was different. The tension of trial had been replaced by a grim anticipation. Everyone knew Victor had been found guilty on all counts. The question now was how severely he'd be punished. Judge Morrison sat at his bench with the weight of justice on his shoulders. Victor stood beside his lawyers, wearing the orange jumpsuit of the convicted, his hands shackled. The respectable facade had been stripped away, revealing the predator beneath. Morrison addressed the courtroom. "We're here for sentencing in the matter of the people versus Victor Dane. Before I pronounce sentence, I'll hear from victims who wish to make impact statements." Alara stood. Her legs shook but held. "I'd like to speak, Your Honor." "Please approach." She walked to the podium set up for speakers, acutely aware of every eye on her. Victor watched her with cold calculation, already planning appeals and revenge from whatever prison he'd be sent to. Alara pulled out the statement she'd written and rewritten a dozen times. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. 2 years ago, I was 16 years old. I'd just lost my mother. I was grieving and vulnerable and desperate for someone to tell me everything would be okay. Victor Dane looked at that grieving girl and saw an opportunity. He saw someone he could isolate, manipulate, and sell for $75,000. Her voice was steady, clear. He took me to Clearwater Hills and told me it was a hospital. He gave me drugs that made me compliant. He destroyed any evidence of my previous life so no one would look for me. He photographed me like inventory and put me on a website where wealthy men could browse teenage girls like they were shopping for cars. Victor's lawyer whispered something to him. He shook his head, his eyes never leaving Alara. For 2 years, I was invisible. I screamed for help and no one heard. I told social workers I was being held against my will and they didn't believe me because Victor had documents saying I was mentally ill. I told doctors I was being sold and they increased my medication. The system that should have protected me instead helped my abuser. Several jurors from the trial were in the gallery. Alara saw them nodding, remembering the evidence they'd seen. Victor Dane didn't just hurt me. He built an entire operation designed to find vulnerable girls and sell them. He created fake medical records to justify holding us. He hired guards to punish us when we resisted. He brought buyers to walk through the facility and choose victims like they were picking out pets. He made millions of dollars destroying lives. She paused, breathing. I survived because I ran, because I crashed through a restaurant door on the worst night of my life and found someone who believed me immediately, who didn't need documents or proof or expert testimony to know I was telling the truth. I survived because Detective Quinn listened, because Agent Mitchell investigated, because U.S. Attorney Reeves fought for justice, because 36 other victims were brave enough to testify. Alara looked directly at Victor. But I shouldn't have had to be that lucky. I shouldn't have had to run 2 miles barefoot in the rain. I shouldn't have had to testify in front of strangers about the worst experiences of my life just to be believed. The system should have worked long before I ended up in that restaurant. She turned back to Judge Morrison. Your Honor, Victor Dane destroyed over 200 lives. He trafficked children. He made millions from their suffering. He showed no remorse, no conscience, no humanity. Even during trial, he tried to make us seem crazy, tried to discredit our stories, tried to escape accountability. He'll do it again, if given the chance. So I'm asking you to make sure he never gets that chance. I'm asking you to give him the maximum sentence allowed by law. Not for revenge, for protection. So no other girl has to run through the rain hoping someone will believe her. Alara folded her statement and returned to her seat. Her whole body was shaking now, adrenaline and relief flooding through her. Sophia spoke next, describing how Victor had promised her parents their daughter would receive excellent care at Clearwater Hills, while actually planning to sell her within 6 months. Maya testified about Dr. Ross's medication experiments and the permanent damage they'd caused. Caroline's statement was read by the prosecutor since she was too young to appear in court, describing 2 years of captivity that had stolen her childhood. One by one, victims spoke. Some were angry, some were crying, some were calm and clinical. But all of them asked for the same thing: maximum sentence, no possibility of parole, permanent removal of a predator who would never stop hunting if given freedom. After the last victim's statement, Judge Morrison turned to Victor. Mr. Dane, do you wish to speak before I pronounce sentence? Victor stood. His lawyers had advised him to show remorse, to apologize, to give the judge some reason for leniency. But Victor's ego wouldn't allow it. Your Honor, I maintain my innocence. This conviction was based on the confused testimony of mentally ill patients and the self-serving lies of subordinates trying to reduce their own sentences. I'm a psychiatrist who dedicated his career to helping troubled youth. If my facility was corrupted by employees acting without my knowledge, that's a failure of oversight, not evidence of criminal intent. Morrison's expression was stone. Anything else? I request the minimum sentence allowed by law and immediate consideration for appeal. This conviction is a miscarriage of justice. Noted. Morrison shuffled papers. Mr. Dane, a jury of your peers found you guilty on 73 felony counts after hearing extensive evidence and victim testimony. That evidence painted a picture of a trafficking operation that you designed, managed, and profited from for over a decade. You exploited vulnerable children, destroyed families, and showed no remorse for your actions. He looked directly at Victor. I've been a judge for 26 years. I've sentenced murderers, rapists, and violent criminals of every variety. But I've never seen someone who so thoroughly commodified human suffering. You didn't just hurt your victims. You built a business around their pain. Morrison opened the sentencing guidelines. On count 1, human trafficking in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years. On count 2, conspiracy to commit trafficking, 25 years to run consecutively. On counts 3 through 73, kidnapping, false imprisonment, fraud, assault, I sentence you to the maximum allowed by law on each count, all to run consecutively. He did the math quickly. Total sentence is 418 years in state prison without possibility of parole. You'll be remanded immediately to begin serving your sentence. The courtroom erupted. Victims were crying, hugging each other. Media was frantically typing. Victor's lawyers were already discussing appeals, though everyone knew that sentence would stand. Victor himself stood frozen, the reality finally penetrating his arrogance. 418 years. He would die in prison. His empire was gone, his reputation destroyed, his freedom permanently revoked. As guards led him away, he looked back at Alara one last time. She met his eyes without fear. He'd had power over her for 2 years, but that power was gone. He was just a man in shackles facing consequences he'd believed would never come. Outside the courthouse, victims gathered on the steps for a press conference organized by Reeves. The U.S. attorney stood at the podium with Alara and Sophia flanking her. Today's sentencing sends a clear message, Reeves said to assembled media. Human trafficking will not be tolerated in this jurisdiction. Wealth, status, and professional credentials do not place anyone above the law, and most importantly, victims will be believed. Reporters shouted questions. Reeves fielded most of them, but one journalist addressed Alara directly. Ms. Vale, you were the first victim to come forward. What do you want people to take away from this case? Alara stepped to the microphone, Officer Park close beside her. I want people to know that trafficking doesn't always look like what you see in movies. It's not always strangers in vans. Sometimes it's stepfathers and psychiatrists and respectable professionals. Sometimes it's hidden behind legitimate businesses and forged documents. Sometimes victims tell the truth and aren't believed because their abusers are too credible, too powerful, too protected. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I also want people to know that survival is possible. Recovery is possible. Justice sometimes is possible. It takes courage to speak up, and it takes people willing to listen. I was lucky enough to find both. I hope other victims will be that lucky too. What's next for you? I'm enrolling in community college in January. I'm going to study social work. I want to become the kind of person who helps victims instead of dismissing them. Someone who believes scared teenagers even when they can't prove their stories. Someone who fights for people the system has failed. Any message for other trafficking victims? Alara looked directly into the cameras, thinking about girls still trapped in situations like hers, still waiting for someone to believe them. Run if you can. Scream if you can't. Tell your story to anyone who'll listen. And don't give up, because somewhere there's someone who will believe you. You just have to keep trying until you find them. As the press conference wrapped up, Detective Quinn pulled Alara aside. There's someone who wants to see you. He's been waiting for the trial to conclude before making contact, but now that everything's over, she gestured to a car parked across the street. Damian Moretti stood beside it, watching the crowd, but making no move to approach. Alara's heart jumped. She hadn't seen him since that night in the restaurant, though she'd thought about him constantly. The man who'd believed her when no one else would. The unlikely protector who'd started this entire chain of events by asking one simple question. Can I talk to him? You're both free citizens now. Talk to whoever you want. Alara crossed the street, Officer Park staying discreetly back but keeping watch. Up close, Damian looked tired. The trial had taken a toll on everyone, but he'd been carrying additional weight, the weight of his sister's ghost, the weight of 15 years of searching and failing. Hi, Alara said softly. Hi. His voice was the same as she remembered, quiet, controlled, dangerous in its calmness. You did well in there. Your testimony, your statement, all of it. I learned from the best. You taught me that telling the truth was enough. Not always, But this time it was. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Elara said, "Detective Quinn told me about your sister. About Lucia. I'm sorry they didn't find her. They're still looking. Every Jane Doe, every unidentified victim, they check against her profile. Maybe someday." He trailed off. "But even if they never find her, this mattered. What you did, what all those victims did, it mattered." "Did it?" "Victor's in prison, but there are other traffickers, other victims. The system that failed us is still failing other people." "True. But 37 girls are free who wouldn't be if you hadn't run through my kitchen. Dozens of buyers are facing prosecution. A network that operated for over a decade is destroyed. That's not nothing." Elara smiled slightly. "Officer Park says the same thing, that I should focus on what we accomplished instead of what's still broken." "Smart woman." "She's a survivor too. Did you know that? She was trafficked when she was 17. That's why she became a cop, to help people like us." Damien nodded slowly. "The world is full of survivors who decided to fight back. You'll be one of them. I'm going to study social work, help other victims, try to fix the system from the inside." "That's good. Better than my approach." "Which is?" "Fixing it from the outside, making sure people who hurt children understand there are consequences beyond legal ones." Elara understood what he wasn't saying. Damien Moretti was a crime boss who'd found his moral line. He'd use his power to protect victims because the legal system couldn't always be trusted to do it. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing me, for saving my life, for everything. You saved yourself. You ran. You told the truth. You fought. I just gave you a safe place to land. Sometimes that's everything." Damien pulled an envelope from his jacket. "This is for you. College fund. Housing assistance until you get on your feet. No strings attached. No obligations. Just help for someone who deserves a second chance." Elara stared at the envelope. "I can't accept this." "You can. You will. Because you're going to need resources to rebuild your life. And I have resources to spare. Let me do this. Let me help one person when I couldn't help my sister." Tears filled Elara's eyes. "This isn't about your sister. You don't owe me anything because you couldn't save her." "Maybe not. But I want to help anyway. Take it. Use it. Build something good from all this horror." Elara accepted the envelope with shaking hands. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me. Just survive. Just thrive. Just become the person you would have been if Victor had never stolen those 2 years. That's all the thanks I need." They stood together on the sidewalk as the sun began to set. Two people connected by tragedy and truth, by the worst night of one person's life becoming the catalyst for justice. "Will I see you again?" Elara asked. "Probably not. I'm not a good person, Elara. I've done things, hurt people, built an empire on fear and violence. The fact that I drew one moral line doesn't erase the other lines I've crossed. You're starting fresh. You don't need someone like me in your life. Someone like you saved me. Once. But going forward, you need legitimate help. Police, counselors, social workers, people who can help you heal without pulling you into my world." Elara understood. Damien was drawing boundaries to protect her, recognizing that his life and hers needed to stay separate. "Okay," she said, "but I'll remember you, and someday when I'm helping some scared kid who needs someone to believe them, I'll think about the man who believed me, and I'll make sure I'm that person for them." Damien's smile was brief but genuine. "That's good. That's exactly what you should do." He got into his car and drove away, disappearing into the city he controlled through fear and careful violence, leaving Elara on a sidewalk with an envelope full of hope and a future full of possibilities. Officer Park approached. "You okay?" "Yeah, better than okay, actually." Elara looked at this courthouse where Victor had been sentenced, at the media still conducting interviews, at the victims hugging each other and crying tears of relief. "I think I'm going to be fine. I think you are too." 6 months later, Elara walked across a community college campus with books tucked under her arm and coffee in her hand. She'd passed her GED with high marks. She'd enrolled in social work courses. She'd moved into a small apartment funded partially by Damien's envelope and partially by a victim services grant. She was building a life. Therapy continued twice a week with Dr. Chen. Nightmares still woke her occasionally, though less frequently now. Some days were harder than others, when memories ambushed her, or when news coverage of trafficking cases triggered panic attacks. But she was learning to live instead of just survive. She volunteered at a youth crisis center, answering hotline calls from teenagers in trouble. She attended support groups for trafficking survivors, sharing her story and listening to others. She testified before a state legislative committee about reforming psychiatric facility oversight. Sophia was thriving in Chicago, back with her family and excelling in high school. Maya had moved to California to live with an aunt and was slowly rebuilding her life. Caroline was in foster care but doing well in therapy and school. The other victims were scattered across the country, each healing at their own pace, each building new lives from the wreckage of their old ones. Victor Dane filed multiple appeals, all of which were denied. He would spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison, never again free to hurt anyone. Senator Morrison had a heart attack 6 months into his sentence and died in the prison infirmary. Judge Whitmore was serving her time in a women's facility, isolated from other inmates for her own protection. Captain Hayes had been attacked by fellow prisoners. Apparently corrupt cops weren't popular in prison, and was now in protective custody. CEO Marcus Thornton continued fighting extradition from Mexico, but international pressure was mounting. The trafficking network that had operated for over a decade was gone. Its victims were recovering, its perpetrators were imprisoned or dead. Justice, imperfect and incomplete, had been served. On the anniversary of the night she'd run through the rain, Ilara returned to Moretti's restaurant. It was early evening, the dinner crowd just beginning to arrive. She walked through the front door this time, not the kitchen entrance she'd crashed through a year ago. Marco was at the host stand. He recognized her immediately. "Ms. Vale, it's good to see you. Is Mr. Moretti here?" "In his booth. I'll tell him you're—" "Actually, can I surprise him?" Marco smiled. "Of course." Ilara walked through the dining room to the back corner booth where Damien Moretti sat alone, reviewing papers with the same controlled focus she remembered. He looked up when she approached, surprise flickering across his face before being replaced by careful neutrality. "Ilara, this is unexpected. I hope it's okay. I know you said we shouldn't stay in contact, but I wanted to tell you something. Sit." She slid into the booth across from him. Up close, she could see he looked better than he had at sentencing, less haunted, still dangerous, still controlled, but carrying a lighter weight. "I start my second semester next week," she said. "I'm taking advanced courses in trauma counseling and victim advocacy. My professors say I have a natural aptitude for it." "That doesn't surprise me. You've lived what you're studying." "I also wanted to thank you again for the college fund, for believing me, for everything." "You already thanked me." "I know, but a year ago tonight, I ran through your kitchen door covered in blood and rain and terror. And you looked at me, really looked at me, and chose to help. You didn't have to. You could have let Victor take me, could have avoided all the complications and investigations, but you didn't. You saved my life." Damien was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I got news last week. They identified one of the bodies from Clearwater Hills, girl named Lucia Torres, 17 years old when she died. Not my sister, but someone's sister, someone who mattered. I'm sorry. Don't be. At least her family has answers now. At least she has a name instead of being Jane Doe forever." He looked at Ilara. "Sometimes that's all we can give victims. Names, justice, the knowledge that they mattered. Is that enough? It has to be, because it's all we have." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two people connected by trauma and truth, by the worst night that had somehow led to the best outcome possible under the circumstances. "I have something for you," Ilara said, pulling a folded paper from her bag. "I wrote this for a class assignment, about the night I escaped, about finding help, about you." Damien unfolded the paper and read. It was a short essay, beautifully written, describing the moment she'd crashed through the kitchen door and found someone who believed her. It described his calm question, "Do you know him?" and how those 4 words had changed everything. It described the trial, the verdict, the sentencing. And it described what came after, healing, growth, the decision to help others. The final line read, "Sometimes the most unlikely people become heroes. Sometimes criminals have stronger moral compasses than respectable citizens. Sometimes the person everyone fears is the only one brave enough to fight monsters. I'm alive because Damien Moretti chose compassion over convenience, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to offer others that same choice. When he finished reading, Damien was silent for a long moment. Then he refolded the paper carefully and handed it back. That's generous. Probably more generous than I deserve. But you deserve credit for what you did. Maybe. But don't romanticize it. I'm still a criminal. I still hurt people. One good action doesn't erase a lifetime of bad ones. No, but it counts for something. It counted for everything to me. Damien gestured to Marco, who brought over 2 glasses of sparkling water. To survival, Damien said, raising his glass. To people who choose to help instead of looking away, Alara countered. They clinked glasses and drank. What's next for you? Damien asked. More school, more volunteering, maybe eventually a job with victim services or a crisis center. I want to build something good from what happened. Want to make sure other girls don't spend 2 years waiting for someone to believe them. That's good work, important work. What about you? What's next for the crime boss who saved a trafficking victim? Damien smiled slightly. Same thing I've always done. Run my empire. Maintain control. But with one new policy. Anyone in my organization who hurts kids gets dealt with permanently. No warnings, no second chances. I'm using my power to make sure monsters understand there are consequences. Vigilante justice. The only kind I know how to provide. Alara understood. The legal system had worked this time, but it didn't always work. For victims who slipped through the cracks, people like Damien Moretti were the last line of defense. Thank you, she said again, for everything. You keep saying that. You can stop now. Not until I'm sure you heard me. Not until I'm sure you understand that what you did mattered. Damien looked at her with ancient, tired eyes that had seen too much and carried too many ghosts. I hear you, and I'm glad I could help. But Alara, you did the hard part. You ran. You spoke. You fought. All I did was give you a safe place to land. The courage was yours. Maybe we both deserves credit. Maybe. Alara stood to leave. Before she walked away, she turned back. If you ever find out what happened to your sister, if you ever get answers, I hope they bring you peace. Thank you. And if you ever need help, real help, emergency help, you call me. Doesn't matter what it is or when, you call. I will. She walked out of the restaurant through the front door into a spring evening that smelled like rain and new beginnings. Behind her, Damien Moretti sat in his booth and watched her leave. This girl who'd crashed into his life and reminded him that some things were worth protecting. Marco appeared at his elbow. She's doing well. She is. You did a good thing, boss. I did one good thing. Doesn't make me good. No, but it makes you better than you were. Damien didn't respond. He just sat in his booth as the restaurant filled with diners and conversations, as the city outside continued its endless dance of light and shadow, as somewhere in the night another victim was running from another monster, hoping to find someone who would believe them. 1 year after the worst night of her life, Alara Vale stood on a community college campus and looked at the future with something approaching optimism. She had scars, physical, emotional, psychological scars that would never fully heal. She had nightmares that still woke her screaming. She had triggers that could send her spiraling into panic attacks. But she also had hope. She had a degree program that challenged and fulfilled her. She had friends who supported her. She had therapy that was slowly untangling the trauma. She had purpose, the knowledge that she could use her pain to help others, that she could become the person she'd needed when she was 16 and desperate. She had survived. And survival, she was learning, was just the beginning. The real work was in the living that came after, in choosing joy despite pain, in building relationships despite fear, in trusting despite betrayal, in believing the world could be good even after experiencing its worst. It was hard work. Some days it felt impossible. But Alara had learned something important that rainy night when she'd crashed through a kitchen door. She was stronger than she knew, braver than she felt, more resilient than trauma had tried to make her believe. She was a survivor, and survivors didn't just endure, they transformed. They took their broken pieces and built something new. They turned their pain into purpose. As she walked across campus toward her social work class, toward a future she was building one choice at a time, Alara Vale smiled. Victor Dane had stolen 2 years of her life, but he hadn't stolen her future. He hadn't destroyed her capacity for hope. He hadn't won. She had. And every day she woke up free. Every day she helped another victim. Every day she chose to keep living instead of just surviving was proof that truth could triumph over lies, that justice could defeat corruption, that one scared girl running through the rain could change everything. The story that had begun with blood and rain and terror had ended with healing and hope and the quiet victory of a survivor who refused to let trauma define her. Alara Vale had run through the rain looking for someone to believe her. She'd found Damien Moretti. She'd found Detective Quinn. She'd found justice. But most importantly, she'd found herself. And that, in the end, was the greatest rescue of all.